In the deepest chambers of forgotten temples, beneath layers of dust that have settled for millennia, lie secrets that time itself seems reluctant to surrender. These are not the mysteries that scholars debate or archaeologists celebrate with fanfare. These are the whispered enigmas that slip through the cracks of recorded history, the sacred shadows that dance just beyond the reach of understanding. Some truths were buried not by accident, but by design. Some knowledge was hidden, not from enemies, but from the very people it was meant to protect. In the silence between heartbeats, in the space between sleeping and waking, these mysteries call to those who dare to listen. They speak of civilizations that chose disappearance over conquest, of rituals that opened doorways to realms unmapped by any earthly compass, of wisdom so profound that it could only be preserved in silence. Tonight, in the gentle embrace of darkness, these sacred mysteries emerge from their eternal slumber. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of the Peruvian Andes, where ancient paths wind through stone corridors carved by hands that knew no steel, there once stood guardians whose names have been swallowed by the very silence they protected. These were the Keepers of Forbidden Thresholds, an order of temple sentries whose existence was whispered about in the sacred songs of the Inca, yet whose true purpose remains as elusive as the morning fog that still clings to those lonely heights. The Spanish chroniclers who first encountered traces of this mysterious brotherhood wrote of men and women who had devoted their entire lives to standing watch over entrances that led not to treasure chambers or burial vaults, but to something far more profound, doorways that opened onto dimensions of existence that the human mind could barely comprehend. These guardians, according to the fragments of testimony that survive, took vows of absolute silence regarding what lay beyond the thresholds they protected, carrying their secrets with them into death rather than risk unleashing forces that could unmake the fabric of reality itself. Archaeological expeditions in the 20th century began to uncover evidence of these enigmatic sentries in the form of sealed chambers, discovered throughout the Andean highlands. What baffled researchers was not what these chambers contained, but what they did not contain. Unlike every other sacred space found in pre-Columbian Peru, these rooms held no gold, no pottery, no mummies wrapped in elaborate textiles. Instead, they contained only emptiness, a profound, almost palpable void that seemed to hum with invisible energy. Dr. Maria Castellanos, who led the most comprehensive study of these threshold chambers in 1987, reported that her team experienced unusual acoustic phenomena whenever they entered these spaces. Whispered conversations seemed to carry for impossible distances, while shouted commands were swallowed by silence so complete it felt alive. Some team members reported hearing their own voices speaking words they had never uttered, as if the chambers themselves were capable of generating echoes from conversations that had never taken place. The walls of these chambers bore no decorative carvings, no religious iconography, nothing that might indicate their purpose to casual observers. Yet sophisticated acoustic analysis revealed that they had been designed with mathematical precision to create resonance frequencies that existed nowhere else in nature. The chambers seemed to have been engineered not to contain physical objects, but to generate states of consciousness that modern science has no framework to explain. Local indigenous communities, when questioned about these mysterious spaces, spoke in hushed tones of the watchers of the between places, guardians who stood at the boundary between the world of form and the realm of pure possibility. According to oral traditions passed down through generations, these keepers possessed the ability to see into multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them ideal sentries for thresholds that existed partially outside normal space-time. The most intriguing theory about the Keepers of Forbidden Thresholds suggests that they were not merely guarding physical doorways, but serving as living anchors for dimensional stability. Some researchers propose that these chambers were designed as portal systems, allowing consciousness to travel between different planes of existence while the physical body remains safely grounded in ordinary reality. The keepers, according to this interpretation, were psychic stabilizers whose mental discipline prevented these interdimensional doorways from becoming chaotic tears in the fabric of space-time. What makes this theory particularly compelling is the fact that every threshold chamber discovered so far shows evidence of having been deliberately sealed from the inside. The massive stone blocks that closed these entrances were positioned in such a way that they could only have been moved by someone already within the chamber. This suggests that the final keepers chose to attune themselves with their thresholds, taking whatever secrets they guarded into an eternal silence that no amount of archaeological investigation has been able to penetrate. The disappearance of the Threshold Keepers remains one of the most haunting mysteries of pre-Columbian Peru. No records exist of their fate. No legends speak of where they went or why they chose to seal themselves away forever. They simply vanished, leaving behind only empty chambers that continue to generate inexplicable acoustic phenomena and an atmosphere of profound otherworldliness that modern visitors find both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Threshold Keeper mystery is the courage it represents, the willingness of human beings to dedicate their lives to guarding doorways to the unknown, standing watch over mysteries so profound that they could only be protected through absolute sacrifice and eternal silence. But thresholds exist not only in stone and shadow, they whisper from the very pages of books that were never meant to survive. In the hushed archives of medieval libraries, where dust motes dance through shafts of amber light and the scent of ancient parchment mingles with the whispered prayers of long-dead scribes, there rest volumes that challenge every assumption about the linear progression of human knowledge. These are manuscripts written in languages that should not have existed when they were created, containing information that their supposed authors could never have possessed, inscribed in inks that glow with an otherworldly luminescence under certain conditions of observation. The most infamous of these impossible texts is the Rohank Codex, a mysterious volume of 448 pages discovered in the Hungarian Academy of Sciences in the 19th century. Written in an unknown script that bears resemblance to both ancient Sumerian cuneiform and medieval Brahmi, the codex contains detailed illustrations of events that appear to depict scenes from Christian, Islamic, and Hindu traditions religious. Knowledge that would have been impossible for any single medieval European scribe to possess. Yet carbon dating consistently places the manuscript's creation in the early 16th century, centuries before such comparative religious scholarship became possible. What makes the Rohank Codex particularly mystifying is not merely its unknown language, but the way that language seems to shift and change depending upon who attempts to decipher it. Linguists who have devoted years to studying the text report that the symbols appear to rearrange themselves between viewing sessions, as if the manuscript itself is alive and consciously resisting translation. Some scholars have suggested that the codex might be written in a form of psychic script, designed to communicate directly with the unconscious mind rather than through conventional linguistic structures. Similar phenomena have been reported with other medieval manuscripts discovered in monasteries across Europe. The Voynich manuscript, perhaps the most famous of these impossible texts, continues to defy every attempt at translation despite centuries of study by the world's most accomplished cryptographers and linguists. What few people realize is that the Voynich manuscript is not unique. It is merely one example of a category of medieval texts that seem to exist outside the normal perimeters of historical possibility. The Abbey of Saint Denis in France houses what monks refer to as the singing scriptures, manuscripts that were allegedly dictated by angelic voices to scribes, who wrote in languages they did not understand. These texts, written in scripts that incorporate mathematical symbols not developed until centuries after their creation, contain prophecies about technological developments that would not occur for hundreds of years. The manuscripts speak of flying machines, underwater vessels, and devices for seeing across vast distances, inventions that would have been incomprehensible to medieval minds. Brother Thomas of Aquinas, who served as the abbey's chief librarian in the 14th century, left detailed records of his encounters with these mysterious texts. He wrote of manuscripts that seemed to write themselves, adding new pages overnight while locked away in secured chambers. He described texts whose words would glow with phosphorescent light when read aloud, and scriptures that could only be deciphered by readers who had achieved specific states of mystical consciousness through prayer and meditation. The most disturbing aspect of these impossible manuscripts is their apparent temporal fluidity. Scribes who worked with these texts reported experiencing visions of future events while copying the mysterious symbols, as if the act of transcription created a bridge between their present moment and times yet to come. Some monks claimed that the manuscripts were not human creations at all, but artifacts that had somehow fallen backward through time from more advanced civilizations, carrying with them knowledge that humanity was not yet ready to receive. Modern analysis of the inks used in these manuscripts reveals compositions that should not have been possible in medieval Europe. Spectroscopic analysis has identified rare earth elements and synthetic compounds that were not discovered until the 20th century, yet these substances are clearly original to the manuscripts rather than later additions. The parchment itself presents similar anomalies, showing cellular structures that do not match any known animal species and dating, results that vary wildly depending upon which section of the manuscript is tested. Perhaps the most intriguing theory about these impossible manuscripts is that they represent attempts by advanced consciousness to communicate across the barriers of linear time. According to this interpretation, the texts are not human creations at all, but messages encoded by beings who exist outside normal temporal constraints and are attempting to prepare humanity for future developments by seeding knowledge at strategic points in history. The scribes who received these otherworldly dictations may have been chosen for their ability to serve as temporal conduits. Their consciousness temporarily expanded to receive information from sources that exist beyond the boundaries of ordinary spacetime. The fact that many of these manuscripts were created in monasteries suggests that the altered states of consciousness achieved through intensive spiritual practice may have made medieval mystics particularly receptive to these transtemporal communications. What remains most mysterious about these impossible manuscripts is not their origin, but their purpose. If they are indeed messages from advanced consciousness attempting to guide human development, why were they encoded in languages that resist translation? Perhaps the act of struggling to understand these texts is itself part of their intended function, designed to expand human consciousness through the very process of attempting to decipher their mysteries. The manuscripts that should not exist continue to challenge our understanding of the relationship between consciousness, time, and knowledge itself, suggesting that wisdom may flow through channels that transcend the linear progression of human learning. Words frozen in time carry their own mysteries, yet some silences speak even louder than the most eloquent script. Spread across the tables of forgotten cartographic societies, rolled within brass tubes in the deepest vaults of maritime museums, lie maps that chart territories which have never appeared on any satellite image, navigate waters that do not exist in any earthly ocean, and mark the locations of cities whose names echo in no living language. These are the productions of the cartographers of unmapped realms, mysterious figures who throughout history have created detailed surveys of lands that exist somewhere beyond the boundaries of ordinary geography. The most celebrated of these impossible charts is the Peary Race Map of 1513, which depicts the coastline of Antarctica with stunning accuracy despite The fact that the continent would not be officially discovered until 1820 and its ice-free coastline would not be mapped until the 1950s using sophisticated sonar equipment. Admiral Piri Reis, the Turkish naval officer who created this extraordinary chart, claimed that he had compiled it from 20 source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, others allegedly drawn by Christopher Columbus himself. What makes the Piri Reis map truly mystifying is not merely its impossible knowledge of Antarctic geography, but the precision of its mathematical projections. Modern cartographic analysis has revealed that the map uses spherical trigonometry of such sophistication that it would not be developed by European mathematicians until the 18th century. The projection method employed requires knowledge of the Earth's exact circumference and the ability to calculate complex, three-dimensional relationships between distant geographical points, mathematical capabilities that 16th century navigators simply did not possess. Yet the Piri Reis map is merely one example of a phenomenon that appears throughout the history of cartography. Medieval European maps frequently depict continents and islands in locations where no landmasses exist, complete with detailed topographical features, river systems, and carefully labeled settlements. These phantom territories are not the result of ignorance or speculation. They are drawn with the same precision and attention to detail as accurately mapped regions, suggesting that their creators had access to genuine geographical knowledge about places that exist outside normal space-time. The Hereford Mappa Mundi, created in the 13th century, shows a world that is simultaneously recognizable and utterly alien. While it accurately depicts many known geographical features, it also includes vast continents in the southern hemisphere, populated by creatures and civilizations that match no earthly reality. The map's creators seem to have possessed detailed knowledge of lands that exist in some parallel version of Earth, complete with trade routes, political boundaries, and cultural centers that function according to their own internal logic. Equally mysterious are the phantom islands that appear on maritime charts across centuries of navigation. Islands like Brazil, Antillia, and St. Brendan's Isle were mapped with such consistency that they appeared on official navigation charts for hundreds of years, complete with detailed harbor descriptions and landing instructions. Expeditions were mounted to locate these islands, and some explorers claimed to have actually visited them, bringing back artifacts and detailed accounts of their inhabitants. What makes these phantom islands particularly intriguing is that they seem to exist in a state of temporal fluidity, appearing and disappearing according to patterns that do not correspond to any earthly geography. Sailors would report sighting these islands under specific atmospheric conditions, usually during moments of heightened consciousness brought on by prolonged isolation at sea. The islands would appear solid and real, complete with vegetation, wildlife, and sometimes even human inhabitants, only to vanish when approached directly or observed through navigational instruments. The most compelling theory about these impossible maps is that they chart not physical territories, but landscapes of consciousness itself. According to this interpretation, the cartographers of unmapped realms were not surveying earthly geography, but mapping the topography of human spiritual potential. The phantom continents and impossible islands represent states of consciousness that can be accessed through specific practices or under particular conditions, existing as real territories within the landscape of the mind. This theory gains credibility when one considers the remarkable consistency with which certain phantom locations appear across cultures and centuries. The Island of Apples, the Land of Eternal Youth, and the Country of the Ever-Living appear in various forms throughout human mythology, always located somewhere beyond the reach of ordinary navigation, but accessible to those who have achieved specific states of spiritual development. Some researchers suggest that these impossible Maps represent ancestral memories of geography from previous epochs of human civilization, times when the Earth's landmasses were configured differently, and advanced cultures possessed navigational technologies that have since been lost. According to this interpretation, the phantom continents and impossible islands are genuine geographical features that exist in alternate timelines or parallel dimensions, occasionally bleeding through into our reality under specific conditions. The most profound mystery surrounding these impossible maps is their apparent ability to guide actual navigation. Throughout history, explorers who have followed the directions provided by phantom charts have reported discovering real islands, harbors, and passages that do not appear on any conventional map. These discoveries suggest that the impossible maps may be more than mere curiosities. They may be functional navigation tools for accessing territories that exist at the intersection of consciousness and physical reality. Modern satellite imagery has confirmed that some of the geographical features depicted on impossible medieval maps do indeed exist, in locations and with topographical details that medieval cartographers could never have surveyed. This discovery has led some researchers to propose that the cartographers of Unmapped realms possessed forms of remote viewing or psychic geography that allowed them to survey distant territories without physical travel. The legacy of these mysterious mapmakers continues to influence modern understanding of the relationship between consciousness and geography, suggesting that the territories of the mind may be as real and mappable as any earthly continent. The urge to chart unknown territories extends beyond land and sea, reaching into the very fabric of creation itself. Within the mathematical precision of ancient stone, where each block was placed according to calculations that seemed to mock the limitations of earthly geometry, stand structures that challenge the fundamental laws of physical space. These are the creations of the architects of impossible spaces, master builders whose understanding of dimensional relationships transcended the boundaries of three-dimensional reality, creating environments where the laws of physics bend like light through crystal, and consciousness itself becomes a construction material. The most documented of these impossible structures is the Coral Castle in Florida, built single-handedly by Edward Leedskalnin between 1923 and 1951. Working entirely alone and using only simple tools, Leedskalnin somehow quarried, carved, and precisely positioned over 1,100 tons of coral rock to create a complex that defies every principle of conventional construction. The massive coral blocks, some weighing as much as 30 tons, were moved and positioned with tolerances measured in fractions of inches. Yet no one ever witnessed Leedskalnin using any machinery capable of handling such enormous weights. What makes the Coral Castle truly extraordinary is not merely the precision of its construction, but the way its spaces seem to exist partially outside normal geometric constraints. Visitors consistently report that rooms within the structure feel larger inside than their external dimensions should allow, and that corridors sometimes appear to extend in directions that do not correspond to the building's actual floor plan. Some guests have reported becoming disoriented while walking through the castle's chambers, emerging from doorways that should lead to familiar courtyards only to find themselves in entirely different sections of the complex. Leedskalnin himself claimed that he had rediscovered the secrets used by the builders of the Egyptian pyramids and Stonehenge, techniques that involved understanding the relationship between magnetism, electricity, and the fundamental forces that hold matter together. He spoke of viewing the universe as composed of individual magnets, cosmic particles that could be influenced and directed through knowledge of their inherent properties. According to his theories, massive objects could be made weightless by aligning their magnetic fields with the Earth's natural electromagnetic grid. Similar phenomena have been reported at ancient structures throughout the world. The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek in Lebanon contains foundation stones that weigh over 800 tons each, positioned with such precision that a sheet of paper cannot be inserted between their joints. These megalithic blocks were quarried from sites located miles away and somehow transported across mountainous terrain using technologies that conventional archaeology cannot explain. The stone's placement demonstrates an understanding of engineering principles that surpasses many modern construction techniques. The most mysterious aspect of these impossible structures is their apparent ability to affect the consciousness of those who enter them. The Great Pyramid of Giza, beyond its well-documented mathematical and astronomical alignments, generates electromagnetic fields that measurably alter human brainwave patterns. Visitors who spend extended periods within the pyramid's chambers report experiences of expanded consciousness, including visions of past and future events, communication with non-physical entities, and profound states of mystical awareness. Research conducted by Dr. Patrick Flanagan in the 1970s revealed that pyramid-shaped structures create standing wave patterns that can affect the molecular structure of water and the growth patterns of plants. These experiments suggest that the architects of impossible spaces understood principles of resonance and field theory that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. The geometric relationships encoded in their structures may have been designed not merely for aesthetic or symbolic purposes, but as functional technologies for consciousness transformation. The Gothic cathedrals of medieval Europe present another category of impossible architecture, spaces that seem to extend upward into dimensions beyond the reach of conventional measurement. These magnificent structures were built according to principles of sacred geometry that their architects claimed were revealed through divine inspiration. The mathematical relationships governing their proportions create acoustic environments where whispered prayers can be heard clearly throughout the entire nave. While normal conversation is absorbed by the stone itself, modern acoustic analysis of Gothic cathedrals has revealed that they function as massive sound chambers, designed to generate specific frequencies that induce states of transcendence in human consciousness. The placement of columns, the curvature of arches, and the angles of vaulted ceilings all contribute to creating standing wave patterns that synchronize with human brainwave frequencies associated with mystical states. These cathedrals were not merely houses of worship, but technologies for facilitating direct spiritual experience. The most intriguing theory about impossible architecture suggests that these structures exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions, with their physical forms serving as anchoring points for non-physical realities. According to this interpretation, the architects of impossible spaces were not merely master builders, but interdimensional engineers who understood how to create stable interfaces between different planes of existence. The disorienting spatial effects reported by visitors may result from their consciousness temporarily accessing these parallel dimensional aspects of the structures. Some researchers propose that impossible architecture represents humanity's attempt to recreate the experience of existing in higher dimensional space while remaining grounded in three-dimensional reality. The buildings may serve as training grounds for consciousness, gradually accustoming human awareness to spatial relationships that transcend ordinary geometric limitations. Through repeated exposure to these impossible spaces, visitors may develop the capacity to perceive and navigate higher dimensional realities. The most profound mystery surrounding impossible architecture is its apparent ability to remain stable across centuries despite violating fundamental principles of structural engineering. Many of these structures should have collapsed under their own weight long ago, yet they continue to stand as monuments to humanity's capacity to transcend the apparent limitations of physical reality through understanding principles of construction that exist at the intersection of consciousness and matter. Architecture shapes consciousness, But some builders sought to shape reality itself through arrangements of stone and intention. Embedded within geological strata that predate human civilization by millions of years, discovered in coal seams formed when the Earth was still young, lie artifacts that exist outside the linear progression of temporal causality. These are the productions of the weavers of time's tapestry, mysterious artisans whose creations seem to exist simultaneously across multiple points in history, challenging our fundamental understanding of cause and effect, while suggesting that consciousness itself may transcend the boundaries of linear time. The most famous of these temporal anomalies is the London Hammer, discovered in 1936 embedded within Ordovician rock formations that are over 400 million years old. This ordinary-looking tool, with its wooden handle and iron head, was found completely encased in rock that had formed long before complex life existed on Earth. Metallurgical analysis revealed that the hammer's iron head was forged using techniques that would not be developed until the 19th century. Yet its position within the geological matrix suggests that it has been there for hundreds of millions of years. What makes the London Hammer particularly mystifying is not merely its impossible age, but the way it seems to exist in a state of temporal suspension. The wooden handle, which should have decayed completely after even a few decades underground, remains perfectly preserved, showing no signs of age or deterioration. The iron head displays a patina that is consistent with extreme age, yet chemical analysis reveals a purity of metal that exceeds modern industrial standards. The hammer appears to exist simultaneously as both an ancient artifact and a relatively recent creation. Similar temporal anomalies have been discovered throughout the world, each one challenging the conventional understanding of archaeological dating and historical chronology. In 1961, 3 geologists cracking open a geode in the Coso Mountains of California discovered what appeared to be a modern spark plug embedded within rock formations that were over 500,000 years old. The object, known as the Coso artifact, displayed technological characteristics that were centuries ahead of any known spark plug design, yet it was completely encased in mineral deposits that required millennia to form. The most intriguing aspect of these out-of-place artifacts is their apparent ability to influence the consciousness of those who discover them. Researchers who have spent extended periods studying these temporal anomalies report experiencing unusual phenomena, including spontaneous memories of events they never witnessed, dreams of advanced civilizations that predate recorded history, and profound insights into the nature of time itself. Some scientists have suggested that these objects serve as temporal anchors, connecting different points in history through consciousness rather than through physical causality. Dr. Virginia Stein McIntyre, a geologist who has spent decades studying anomalous artifacts in geological contexts, has proposed that certain objects exist in what she terms temporal loops, cyclical patterns of manifestation that allow them to appear at multiple points in history simultaneously. According to her theory, these artifacts may originate from civilizations that achieve mastery over temporal mechanics, enabling them to send objects backward and forward through time as messages to past and future generations. The phenomenon becomes even more mysterious when considering artifacts that seem to age backward rather than forward. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece, displays technological sophistication that exceeds the mechanical knowledge attributed to ancient Greek civilization. As researchers have studied this bronze device more thoroughly, they have discovered additional gears and mechanisms that were not visible in earlier examinations, as if the artifact is gradually revealing more of its complexity over time. Some of the most compelling evidence for temporal weaving comes from artifacts that exist in multiple versions across different time periods. The crystal skulls discovered throughout Mesoamerica appear to be identical in design and construction. yet they have been found in archaeological contexts spanning centuries. Detailed analysis reveals that while the skulls are carved from the same type of crystal using identical techniques, they display different stages of aging and wear, as if they are the same object observed at different points in its temporal existence. The most revolutionary theory about these temporal artifacts suggests that they represent evidence of consciousness existing outside linear time. According to this interpretation, advanced beings who have transcended temporal limitations use physical objects as anchoring points for communicating across different epochs of history. The artifacts serve as three-dimensional letters in a correspondence between past and future consciousness, carrying information that can only be decoded by minds capable of perceiving beyond the constraints of linear causality. This theory gains credibility when considering the reported effects of prolonged exposure to temporal artifacts. Individuals who work closely with these objects often develop what researchers term temporal sensitivity, the ability to perceive events from multiple time periods simultaneously. Some report experiencing life as a continuous present moment. That includes past and future events as equally real and immediate experiences. Modern quantum physics provides a theoretical framework that might explain these temporal phenomena. The concept of quantum entanglement suggests that particles can maintain instantaneous connections across vast distances, seemingly violating the speed of light limitations that govern classical physics. Some theorists propose that consciousness itself may operate through quantum entanglement, allowing information to flow between different temporal locations through non-local connections that transcend space-time boundaries. The most profound implication of temporal artifacts is their suggestion that reality itself may be far more fluid and responsive to consciousness than conventional science acknowledges. If objects can exist simultaneously across multiple time periods, then the relationship between mind and matter may be fundamentally different from what materialistic worldviews assume. The weavers of time's tapestry may have understood principles of consciousness-matter interaction that modern civilization is only beginning to rediscover. Perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding temporal artifacts is not how they exist outside linear time, but why they choose to reveal themselves at specific moments in human history, as if time itself is conscious and actively participating in humanity's spiritual evolution. Objects carry the imprint of their makers across centuries, but some impressions reach even deeper into the substrate of existence. Within the acoustically perfect chambers of abandoned temples, where silence has reigned for centuries, yet somehow preserves the echo of voices that have long since dissolved into dust, there exist phenomena that challenge our understanding of how sound travels through time and space. These are the territories of the singers of forgotten songs, mysterious vocalists whose melodies continue to resonate through dimensions beyond the reach of ordinary hearing, creating bridges between the realm of the living and the eternal chorus of consciousness itself. The phenomenon first gained systematic attention in the 1960s, when archaeologist Dr. James Morrison was conducting nighttime surveys of Mayan ruins in Guatemala's Petén region. Working alone in the pre-dawn hours to avoid tourist interference, Morrison began hearing what he described as impossibly beautiful singing, emanating from the interior chambers of Temple 4 at Tikal. The voices, he reported, sang in perfect harmony using musical intervals that do not exist in any known earthly scale, creating melodies that seem to bypass the ears entirely and resonate directly within the consciousness of the listener. What made Morrison's experience particularly remarkable was his discovery that the phantom singing could be recorded using sensitive audio equipment, despite the fact that no living singers were present. The recordings revealed vocal techniques that exceeded the capabilities of human anatomy, including harmonic overtones that required multiple vocal cords and breathing patterns that could sustain notes for impossible durations. Analysis of the spectrogram showed frequencies that extended both below and above the range of human hearing, suggesting that the phantom singers were operating across a spectrum of sound that transcended normal acoustic limitations. Similar phenomena have been documented at sacred sites throughout the world. The stone circles of ancient Britain, particularly Stonehenge and Avebury, generate what researchers have termed acoustic shadows, areas where phantom music can be heard despite the complete absence of any sound source. These manifestations occur most frequently during specific astronomical alignments, particularly during solstices and equinoxes, when the Earth's relationship to cosmic forces creates optimal conditions for interdimensional sound transmission. The most intriguing aspect of phantom sacred music is its apparent relationship to the geometric properties of the spaces where it manifests. Dr. Stephen Halpern, a researcher specializing in the therapeutic applications of sound, has discovered that temples and sacred sites displaying phantom music phenomena are invariably designed according to principles of harmonic resonance. The proportions of these structures correspond to mathematical ratios that are found in musical intervals, suggesting that ancient architects understood how to create buildings that could function as massive musical instruments capable of channeling sound from non-physical dimensions. The Great Pyramid of Giza exemplifies this principle of architectural acoustics. Recent research has revealed that the pyramid's internal chambers are precisely tuned to resonate at specific frequencies that correspond to the fundamental tones of the Earth's electromagnetic field. When these chambers are activated by sound, either through vocal toning by visitors or through natural phenomena such as wind patterns, they generate standing wave patterns that can induce profound alterations in human consciousness. Some visitors report hearing celestial choirs singing in languages that predate any known human speech, as if the pyramid itself serves as a receiving station for cosmic transmissions. The most mysterious characteristic of phantom sacred music is its apparent intelligence and responsiveness to human consciousness. The singing does not seem to be random environmental phenomena, but rather appears to respond to the spiritual state and emotional needs of those who encounter it. Visitors who approach sacred sites with reverence and open hearts report experiencing elaborate musical presentations that seem specifically composed for their individual healing and transformation. The phantom singers appear to diagnose spiritual conditions and prescribe precisely the musical frequencies needed to restore harmony and balance. Brother Timothy of the Monastery of Silos in Spain has documented decades of encounters with phantom Gregorian chant that echoes through the monastery's ancient stone corridors. These ghostly voices, he reports, sing with perfect pitch and timing despite the fact that no human singers are present. Most remarkably, the phantom choir seems to know liturgical music that was lost centuries ago, performing complex polyphonic arrangements that exist in no surviving manuscripts. The voices appear most frequently during periods of deep communal prayer, as if the collective devotion of the living monks creates conditions that allow the eternal chorus to manifest. Scientific investigation of phantom sacred music has revealed patterns that suggest these phenomena may represent a form of consciousness that exists independently of physical brains and vocal cords. The mathematical precision of the harmonic relationships, the complexity of the rhythmic structures, and the sophisticated emotional content of the music all indicate levels of intelligence and creativity that transcend what could be produced by random acoustic phenomena or psychological suggestion. Some researchers propose that phantom sacred music represents the preservation of human consciousness after physical death, with the song serving as a form of immortal memory that continues to exist within the electromagnetic fields generated by sacred architecture. According to this theory, the most spiritually advanced singers throughout history have learned to imprint their consciousness onto the harmonic structures of sacred spaces, allowing their voices to continue singing long after their bodies have returned to dust. The most profound theory about phantom sacred music suggests that it represents direct communication from what mystics have termed the symbiotic celestial hierarchy, advanced consciousness that exists beyond the limitations of physical incarnation and uses music as a within the acoustically perfect chambers, abandoned temples, where silence has reigned for centuries, yet somehow preserves the echo of voices that have long since dissolved into dust. There exist phenomena that challenge our understanding of how sound travels through time and space. These are the territories of the singers of forgotten songs, mysterious vocalists whose melodies continue to resonate through dimensions beyond the reach of ordinary hearing, creating bridges between the realm of the living and the eternal chorus of consciousness itself. The phenomenon first gained systematic attention in the 1960s, when archaeologist Dr. James Morrison was conducting nighttime surveys of Mayan ruins in Guatemala's Petén region. Working alone in the pre-dawn hours to avoid tourist interference, Morrison began hearing what he described as impossibly beautiful singing, emanating from the interior chambers of Temple 4 at Tikal. The voices, he reported, sang in perfect harmony using musical intervals that do not exist in any known earthly scale, creating melodies that seem to bypass the ears entirely and resonate directly within the consciousness of the listener. What made Morrison's experience particular in the forgotten corners of our world, where ancient stones have stood sentinel for millennia, something extraordinary occurs. Plants grow in patterns that defy every law of botany. Their arrangement so precise, so mathematically perfect, that they seem to have been guided by an intelligence far beyond the simple imperative of survival. These are not the random clusterings of nature's chance, but deliberate compositions that speak of intention, of purpose, of a consciousness that works through root and leaf to create living mandalas upon the earth-dotted Stonehenge. Researchers have documented circles of wildflowers that bloom in perfect geometric harmony, their petals opening in synchronized waves that follow no earthly season. The flowers appear overnight, fully formed, as if summoned from some ethereal seed bank that exists outside the normal cycles of growth and decay. Local botanists, their voices hushed with wonder and confusion, speak of varieties that shouldn't exist, hybrid blooms that combine characteristics from plants, separated by continents and evolutionary epochs. In the shadow of Machu Picchu, high in the thin air where few plants dare to flourish, gardens of impossible beauty emerge from bare stone. Orchids of colors that have no names bloom from cracks in the ancient walls, their roots somehow finding sustenance in solid granite. The indigenous people, keepers of memories older than written history, whisper that these are the tears of the mountain spirits, crystallized into living beauty by prayers spoken in languages that predate human speech. The phenomena extend beyond mere flowering. At sacred sites across the globe, trees grow in formations that mirror the sacred geometry encoded in the temples themselves. In the ruins of Angkor Wat, banyan trees have arranged themselves in spirals that precisely match the mathematical ratios found in the temple's architecture. Their roots follow pathways that align with underground energy currents, creating a living nervous system that connects the temple to the surrounding forest in ways that conventional biology cannot explain. Perhaps most mysterious are the reports of plants that respond to human consciousness itself. At Glastonbury Tour, visitors consistently describe flowers that turn to follow their gaze, that brighten in color when approached with reverence, that seem to withdraw into themselves when encountered with skepticism or disrespect. The local groundskeepers, many of whom have tended these mysterious gardens for decades, speak in quiet voices of roses that bloom only for those who truly need their beauty, of healing herbs that appear precisely when seekers arrive searching for specific remedies. Scientists studying these phenomena propose theories that stretch the boundaries of accepted knowledge. Some suggest that the electromagnetic fields generated by sacred sites might influence plant growth in ways we're only beginning to understand. Others explore the possibility that consciousness itself, focused and amplified by sacred architecture, might directly affect the quantum processes that govern cellular development. The most daring researchers whisper of morphic fields, invisible templates that guide living systems toward patterns of sacred significance. The soil itself seems to hold memory at these locations. Chemical analysis reveals compositions that shouldn't exist naturally. Traces of minerals found nowhere else on Earth, mixed with organic compounds of impossible complexity. In some cases, the Earth appears to be actively generating nutrients specifically designed for the unusual plants that grow there, as if the land itself has developed a conscious partnership with the vegetation it supports. Time behaves strangely. In these sacred gardens, flowers have been observed blooming and wilting in accelerated cycles, their entire lifespans compressed into moments of extraordinary beauty. Others seem to exist outside temporal constraints entirely, their petals never fading, their colors never dimming, as if they have achieved a state of botanical immortality through proximity to the eternal. The fragrance of these impossible gardens carries its own mysteries. Visitors describe scents that evoke memories they've never made, that transport consciousness to landscapes that exist only in dreams. Some speak of perfumes that seem to encode information directly into the nervous system, bypassing language, and thought to communicate pure emotion, pure knowing, pure presence. Indigenous shamans and modern mystics alike recognize these botanical anomalies as expressions of the Earth's deepest wisdom. They understand that the plants are not merely responding to unknown forces, but are themselves conscious. In the forgotten corners of our world, where ancient stones have stood sentinel for millennia, something extraordinary occurs. Plants grow in patterns that defy every law of botany. Their arrangement so precise, so mathematically perfect, that they seem to have been guided by an intelligence far beyond the simple imperative of survival. These are not the random clusterings of nature's chance, but deliberate compositions that speak of intention, of purpose, of a consciousness that works through root and leaf to create living mandalas upon the earth. At Stonehenge, researchers have documented circles of wildflowers that bloom in perfect geometric harmony, their petals opening in synchronized waves that follow no earthly season. The flowers appear overnight, fully formed, as if summoned from some ethereal seed bank that exists outside the normal cycles of growth and decay. In the remote canyons of Utah, on a wall of red sandstone that has stood unchanged for millions of years, something impossible happened in 1987. A park ranger making his morning rounds discovered a new petroglyph, a spiral design of extraordinary complexity carved into rock that had been photographed and documented just days before. The stone showed no signs of disturbance, no tool marks, no evidence of human intervention. The carving appeared ancient, weathered by centuries of exposure, yet it had materialized overnight in a location under constant surveillance. This was not an isolated incident. Across the globe, at sites both famous and forgotten, rock art continues to manifest in defiance of everything we understand about the relationship between human consciousness and solid matter. The phenomenon occurs most frequently at locations already rich with ancient markings, as if the stones themselves have learned the language of symbol and story, and continue the conversation across millennia with visitors they deem worthy of. Their secrets in the caves of Lascaux, sealed and protected from human access. Infrared cameras have captured the gradual appearance of new images not painted in pigment, but somehow emerging from within the limestone itself. The figures seem to grow like slow-motion flowers, their outlines becoming visible over weeks or months, their details filling in with the patience of geological time. Yet when analyzed, the molecular structure of these new markings proves identical to paintings created 30,000 years ago, as if the cave walls have developed the ability to remember and reproduce the creative intentions of long vanished artists. The Aboriginal people of Australia, keepers of the world's oldest continuous artistic tradition, speak of this phenomenon without surprise. Their elders describe the landscape itself as a living canvas, one that continues to paint its own stories long after human hands have been stilled by death. They tell of dreamtime beings who never truly departed, who continue to inscribe their journeys across the sacred sites through a form of consciousness that operates beyond the limitations of physical form. To them, the appearance of new rock art is not a mystery to be solved, but a gift to be received with gratitude and reverence. The markings themselves defy conventional understanding of how images are created in stone. Unlike traditional petroglyphs, which show clear evidence of pecking, grinding, or carving, these new manifestations appear to have emerged through a process that rearranges the rock's molecular structure from within. The images possess a depth and dimensionality that suggests they extend far below the visible surface, as if entire stories have been encoded in three-dimensional hieroglyphs that we can only perceive in cross-section. Perhaps most intriguing are the interactive petroglyphs, rock art that appears to respond to the presence and consciousness of observers. At sites throughout the American Southwest, researchers have documented symbols that seem to shift and change depending on who is viewing them and in what state of mind. A spiral might transform into a human figure when approached with reverence, or fade entirely when observed with skepticism. Native American guides describe these responsive images as tests, ways for the stone spirits to determine whether visitors are ready to receive deeper teachings. The temporal aspects of this phenomenon challenge our understanding of causality itself. In some cases, new petroglyphs depict events that occur days or weeks after their appearance, as if the stones possess prophetic abilities. At other sites, the images seem to exist in multiple time periods simultaneously, ancient to some observers, freshly carved to others, non-existent to still others, all depending on the consciousness brought to the encounter. Scientific analysis of these manifestations reveals compositions that should not exist naturally. The mineral structures within the images contain elements not found in the surrounding rock, arranged in crystalline patterns that suggest exposure to technologies or forces unknown to conventional archaeology. Some researchers propose that consciousness itself, when focused with sufficient intensity and intention, might be able to restructure matter at the atomic level, literally thinking new realities into existence. The subject matter of these spontaneous carvings follows patterns that transcend cultural boundaries. Spirals, human figures with outstretched arms, animals that seem to shimmer between realistic and mythological forms. These themes appear across continents and centuries with such consistency that they suggest a universal symbolic language embedded in the collective unconscious of both humanity and the earth itself. Local, indigenous communities often report dreams or visions that coincide with the appearance of new rock art. Individuals describe receiving detailed instructions in their sleep about where to look for new markings, what they will depict, and what messages they carry for the community. In many cases, the dreamers have never visited the sites where the images appear, yet their descriptions prove remarkably accurate down to the smallest detail. The stones themselves seem to choose their scribes carefully. The phenomenon occurs most frequently in the presence of individuals who approach the sites with deep respect, who understand rock art as more than mere decoration or historical curiosity. It is as if the landscape recognizes kindred consciousness and responds by revealing aspects of its deeper nature, sharing stories that exist in the liminal space between matter and mind, between past and future, between the solid certainty of stone and the fluid possibilities of dream. Stone, remembers. What flesh forgets, but some memories are too profound for any earthly vessel to contain. In the heart of Ireland, where mist clings to ancient hills like the breath of sleeping giants, there exists a well that glows with its own inner light. The locals call it Tober na July, the well of the moon, though the illumination that rises from its depths bears no resemblance to reflected sunlight. The water itself seems luminous, as if each molecule has been transformed into liquid starlight, creating an ethereal glow that pulses in rhythm with something deeper than any earthly heartbeat. This phenomenon is not unique to Ireland's mystical landscape. Across the globe, at sites both celebrated and hidden, sacred waters display properties that challenge every assumption about the nature of H2O. In Tibet, high in the Himalayas where the air grows thin and the boundary between earth and heaven blurs, monastery wells glow with colors that have no names in human language. The monks speak in whispers of these waters as tears of the Buddha, each drop containing the accumulated compassion of 10,000 lifetimes. The luminescence appears to respond to consciousness itself. Skeptical visitors often find the wells dark and ordinary, their waters reflecting nothing more unusual than clouds and sky. But those who approach with reverence, who understand water as more than mere chemistry, witness displays of light that transform their understanding of what is possible in our material world. The illumination seems to emerge from within the water molecules themselves, as if consciousness and liquid have discovered a way to dance together in visible harmony. In the American Southwest, where ancient peoples once gathered around springs. In the vast desert, some of these waters continue to flow uphill in defiance of gravity's iron law. The Hopi speak of these reverse streams as pathways for spirits returning home, channels through which the wisdom of the ancestors flows back into the world of the living. Scientific instruments confirm the impossible. Water that maintains its upstream flow for hundreds of yards, powered by forces that conventional physics cannot explain or measure. The seasonal behavior of these sacred springs follows patterns that align not with earthly weather, but with celestial cycles invisible to most human awareness. Wells that flow abundantly during solar eclipses, springs that appear only during specific planetary alignments, waters that change their mineral composition in harmony with the phases of the moon. These phenomena suggest that some liquids maintain connection to cosmic rhythms far subtler than the simple pull of tides. Temperature anomalies add another layer to the mystery. In Scotland's ancient stone circles, pools of water maintain consistent temperatures regardless of season, remaining warm enough for bathing even when surrounded by snow, or staying refreshingly cool during the height of summer. Local folklore describes these as gifts from the otherworld, portals where the temperature of paradise seeps through into our earthly realm. The healing properties of these waters extend beyond anything that can be explained by mineral content or chemical composition. Pilgrims travel thousands of miles to drink from springs that appear to cure ailments through mechanisms that medical science cannot identify or replicate. The waters seem to carry information rather than mere nutrients, encoding healing frequencies directly into the cellular matrix of those who consume them with faith and reverence. Perhaps most mysterious are the springs that appear and disappear according to the spiritual needs of their communities. During times of drought, both physical and metaphysical, new sources of water manifest in locations where geological surveys insist no aquifers exist. These waters flow with perfect timing, providing sustenance exactly when and where it is needed most, then vanishing once their purpose has been fulfilled, leaving no trace of their impossible existence. The acoustic properties of these sacred waters create soundscapes that exist nowhere else in nature. Some springs emit harmonious tones that seem to arise from the water itself, creating natural cathedrals of sound that induce profound states of meditation and transcendence. Researchers have recorded frequencies that shouldn't be possible for moving water, tones that seem to encode mathematical relationships found in the most sacred geometries. Ancient traditions speak of water as the first mirror of consciousness, the primal medium through which awareness first glimpsed its own reflection. These luminous wells and impossible springs might represent locations where this primordial relationship between mind and matter remains visible, where the original unity of consciousness and cosmos continues to express itself through the simple miracle of flowing water. The custodians of these liquid light phenomena are often the waters themselves, requiring no human intervention to maintain their mysterious properties. They seem to exist as self-sustaining systems that operate according to laws we have yet to discover, drawing their energy from sources that transcend the normal boundaries between the pairs, physical and metaphysical realms. In the gentle moments before sleep, when consciousness begins its nightly journey into the realm of dreams, we might imagine these glowing waters as tears of joy shed by the earth itself, expressions of a planet's gratitude for the consciousness that has evolved within its embrace. Each luminous drop carries the memory of every raindrop that has ever fallen, every stream that has ever flowed, every ocean that has ever dreamed of touching the sky. Water carries life from realm to realm, but some currents flow through territories unmarked by any earthly compass. On the windswept plain of Salisbury, where Stonehenge has stood sentinel for over 4 millennia, archaeoastronomers have made a discovery that challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient knowledge. The monument stones are aligned not only with the obvious celestial events, solstices and equinoxes that any careful observer might notice, but with astronomical phenomena so subtle and complex that they shouldn't have been detectable without modern telescopes and computational power. The builders of Stonehenge somehow knew about the 18.6-year lunar cycle, a wobble in the moon's orbit so slight that it escaped scientific notice until the 20th century. They incorporated this knowledge into their sacred architecture with mathematical precision that rivals the accuracy of contemporary astronomical software. More mysteriously still, the monument seems to predict celestial events thousands of years into the future, as if its creators possessed not just advanced observational skills, but prophetic insight into the cosmic dance that unfolds across millennia. This phenomenon extends far beyond Britain's ancient stone circles. In the jungles of Guatemala, the Maya built pyramids that encode knowledge of planetary cycles so complex that modern astronomers are still discovering their implications. The Temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza demonstrates awareness of Venus's 584-day synodic period, Mercury's orbital mechanics, and the intricate relationships between multiple planetary cycles that shouldn't have been observable to naked eye astronomy. Perhaps most remarkable is the Maya's long count calendar, which incorporates knowledge of galactic scale rhythms that modern science has only recently begun to understand. The calendar's great cycles align with the solar system's movement through the galaxy, tracking stellar processes that unfold over millions of years. How could ancient astronomers, limited to naked eye observation, have detected patterns that require sophisticated instruments and decades of careful measurement to confirm? In Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza encodes stellar knowledge that defies conventional explanations. Its internal chambers align with specific stars, not as they appeared when the pyramid was built, but as they would appear thousands of years later after accounting for the precession of the equinoxes. The builders somehow calculated not just the current positions of distant suns, but their future locations in the slowly wheeling cosmic dome. The mystery deepens when we consider structures built by cultures that had no contact with each other, yet demonstrate virtually identical astronomical knowledge. From Cambodia's Angkor Wat to Peru's Sacsayhuaman, from Easter Island's Moai to the stone circles of Armenia, Ancient builders incorporated the same complex celestial relationships into their sacred architecture. The 26,000-year precession cycle, the intricate dance of Jupiter and Saturn, the subtle rhythms of stellar proper motion, all appear encoded in stone by civilizations, separated by vast distances and centuries of time. Indigenous oral traditions offer tantalizing hints about the source of this impossible knowledge. Aboriginal Australians speak of the Dreamtime as a period when the ancestors walked directly among the stars, learning their songs and stories through direct communion rather than distant observation. Andean shamans describe ayahuasca visions, in which consciousness expands to encompass galactic perspectives, downloading astronomical data through states of awareness that transcend individual human consciousness. Some researchers propose that ancient peoples accessed cosmic information through altered states of consciousness, that the same neural pathways that process psychedelic experiences might also be capable of directly perceiving celestial rhythms and relationships. In this model, astronomy becomes not just observation, but participation, a form of cosmic consciousness in which human awareness temporarily merges with the larger rhythms of the universe. The precision of these ancient astronomical alignments suggests knowledge that goes beyond even extended observation. Some structures track stellar positions with accuracy that approaches the theoretical limits of measurement, accounting for atmospheric distortion, parallax effects, and other factors that weren't formally understood until the development of modern astrophysics. It's as if the builders possessed not just detailed star charts, but comprehensive theories about the nature of space, time, and celestial mechanics. Archaeological evidence continues to reveal new layers of this astronomical sophistication. Recent discoveries in Turkey, at Göbekli Tepe, indicate that hunter-gatherer societies were encoding complex stellar knowledge in stone monuments over 11,000 years ago, long before the supposed invention of agriculture, writing, or civilization itself. The implications challenge our entire understanding of human cognitive development and the timeline of astronomical discovery. The structures themselves seem to function as more than mere calendars or observatories. Many appear designed to create specific consciousness states during particular celestial events, using acoustic properties, light effects, and architectural proportions to induce transcendent experiences precisely when the heavens reach specific configurations. On the windswept plain of Salisbury, where Stonehenge has stood sentinel for over 4 millennia, archaeoastronomers have made a discovery that challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient knowledge. The monument stones are aligned not only with the obvious celestial events, solstices and equinoxes that any careful observer might notice, but with astronomical phenomena so subtle and complex that they shouldn't have been detectable without modern telescopes and computational power. The builders of Stonehenge somehow knew about the 18.6-year lunar cycle, a wobble in the moon's orbit so slight that it escaped scientific notice until the 20th century. They incorporated this knowledge into their sacred architecture with mathematical precision that rivals the act. In 1994, archaeologist named Sarah Chun began experiencing the same dream every night for 3 months. In vivid detail, she saw herself walking through an underground chamber carved from living rock, its walls covered with symbols that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The architecture was unlike anything in the archaeological record, flowing, organic forms that suggested construction techniques unknown to conventional engineering. Most remarkably, she could read the symbols, understanding their meaning with perfect clarity despite never having encountered the writing system before. When excavations at Cataluyuk in Turkey uncovered a chamber matching her dreams in every detail, Dr. Chun found herself at the center of a phenomenon that challenges our understanding of consciousness, memory, and the nature of archaeological discovery. The symbols on the walls were precisely as she had dreamed them, their meanings aligning exactly with her dream interpretations. The discovery would have been remarkable enough on its own, but the fact that it had been previewed in such detail by someone who had never visited the site suggested mechanisms of knowing that transcend the normal boundaries of space and time. Dr. Chan's experience is part of a larger pattern that archaeologists rarely discuss in professional journals, but whisper about in private conversations. Around the world, significant archaeological discoveries are preceded by detailed dreams experienced by individuals who have no prior knowledge of the sites. These dreams often provide not just visual information, but complete understanding of the structure's purposes, construction methods, and historical significance. The phenomenon extends beyond professional archaeologists to include local residents, tourists, and even children who report dreaming of ancient structures years before their discovery. In Mexico, a 12-year-old girl drew detailed pictures of Mayan glyphs that weren't identified by scholars until a decade later. Her drawings, complete with accurate translations, were dated and witnessed by her teacher, creating documentation that predates the official archaeological interpretations by years. Some sites seem to actively communicate through the dream state, reaching out to specific individuals who possess the knowledge or resources necessary to ensure their discovery and proper interpretation. The phenomenon suggests that ancient structures might retain some form of consciousness or memory, actively participating in their own rediscovery by projecting information into the dreams of suitable recipients. The accuracy of these prophetic dreams often extends to minute details that couldn't be inferred from general knowledge or educated guessing. Dreamers describe specific tool marks on stone surfaces, the exact arrangement of artifacts, even the colors and textures of pottery that has been buried for millennia. When excavations confirm these details, the implications extend far beyond archaeological methodology into questions about the fundamental nature of information storage and consciousness itself. Particularly intriguing are the cases where multiple individuals share identical dreams about the same undiscovered site. In Peru, an entire village reported dreaming of the same hidden temple, complete with detailed floor plans and descriptions of specific artifacts. When the site was eventually located and excavated, it matched the collective dreams with extraordinary precision, suggesting that some form of mass telepathic communication might be possible under certain circumstances. The timing of these dreams often correlates with optimal conditions for discovery and excavation. Sites seem to reveal themselves through dreams precisely when political conditions, funding availability, and technological capabilities align to make successful excavation possible. It's as if the structures possess not just memory, but strategic intelligence, choosing their moments of revelation with careful consideration of practical factors. The content of the dreams frequently includes information about the spiritual and ceremonial purposes of the sites, knowledge that would be impossible to determine from physical remains alone. Dreamers describe elaborate rituals, explain the symbolic significance of architectural features, and provide insights into the belief systems of vanished cultures. When this information can be verified through independent research, it proves remarkably accurate, suggesting that the dreams might provide genuine access to historical consciousness. Some researchers propose that certain locations might exist simultaneously in both physical reality and the collective unconscious, maintaining continuous presence in the realm of dreams even when their physical forms are buried or destroyed. In this model, archaeological sites are not just remnants of past civilizations, but active participants in an ongoing dialogue between past and present. Using dreams as their primary communication medium, the psychological profiles of individuals who experience these prophetic dreams show interesting patterns. Many possess deep spiritual connections to the cultures associated with the sites, sometimes reporting feelings of past life memories or ancestral connections. Others are highly sensitive individuals who seem naturally attuned to subtle information fields that most people cannot consciously access. The architectural details revealed in dreams often include construction techniques that prove more sophisticated than initially apparent to conventional archaeological analysis. Dreamers describe complex engineering solutions, hidden chambers, and structural innovations that only become visible through careful excavation guided by the dream information. The buildings seem to use dreams as a way of providing their own. In 1994, an archaeologist named Sarah Chun began experiencing the same dream every night for 3 months. In vivid detail, she saw herself walking through an underground chamber carved from living rock, its walls covered with symbols that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The architecture was unlike anything in the archaeological record, flowing, organic forms that suggested construction techniques unknown to conventional engineering. Most remarkably, she could read the symbols, understanding their meaning with perfect clarity despite never having encountered the writing. At the ancient stone circle of Attery in England, time does not behave as it should. Visitors armed with atomic clocks and GPS devices have documented temporal anomalies that defy explanation, zones where time moves perceptibly slower than in surrounding areas, creating pockets of dilated temporality that seem to exist independently of Einstein's relativity. In these spaces, minutes stretch into subjective hours, allowing experiences of profound depth and duration within brief, objective intervals. The phenomenon is not limited to Avebury. Across the globe, sacred sites demonstrate similar temporal distortions that suggest the presence of forces capable of manipulating the very fabric of space-time. At Delphi, where ancient Greeks sought prophetic visions from the oracle, modern researchers have recorded time dilation effects that correlate precisely with the sites of greatest spiritual significance. The more sacred the location, the more pronounced the temporal anomalies become. Mrs. Margaret Whitman, a retired schoolteacher from Devon, experienced one of the most documented cases of temporal displacement at Stonehenge in 1973. Entering the Maiwend stone circle at precisely 3:17 p.m., according to multiple witnesses, she emerged moments later convinced that hours had passed. Her watch, which had been synchronized with those of her companions, showed 6:43 p.m., a 3.5-hour discrepancy that could not be explained by mechanical malfunction. More remarkably, she had aged visibly during her brief absence, her hair showing gray roots that had not been present earlier, her skin bearing the subtle changes of accelerated time. The reverse phenomenon occurs with equal frequency. Visitors report spending entire days at sacred sites, engaging in profound spiritual experiences, only to discover that mere minutes have elapsed in the outside world. Their companions, waiting just beyond the site's influence, confirm that virtually no time has passed, yet the experiencers return with detailed memories of extended encounters with otherworldly beings, visions of past and future events, and transformative insights that typically require lengthy meditation or ceremonial practice to achieve. The temporal effects seem to respond to consciousness itself, becoming more pronounced in the presence of individuals who approach the sites with reverence and spiritual openness. Skeptical visitors often experience no temporal anomalies whatsoever, while those who enter with meditative awareness frequently encounter the most dramatic time distortions. This suggests that consciousness and temporality might be more intimately connected than conventional physics acknowledges. Some of the most intriguing reports describe visitors witnessing events from other time periods as if they were occurring in the present moment. At Machu Picchu, tourists have photographed figures in ink and dress walking among the ruins, only to find that their cameras captured nothing unusual when the images were developed. The figures appear to exist in a temporal layer that conscious Perception can access, but physical instruments cannot record. The archaeology of these sites reveals construction techniques that seem designed to manipulate temporal flow. Stone arrangements often follow mathematical principles related to frequency, resonance, and wave mechanics patterns that modern physics recognizes as fundamental to the nature of time itself. The builders appear to have understood principles of temporal engineering that contemporary science is only beginning to glimpse in Tibet. Certain monasteries report monks who entered deep meditation and emerged to find that decades have passed in the outside world while they experienced only hours of subjective time. The monastery records, meticulously kept for centuries, document cases of individuals who have lived for hundreds of years through this time dilation effect. Their aging slowed to a fraction of normal rates through practices that seem to alter their relationship with temporal flow. The biological implications of these phenomena extend beyond simple aging acceleration or deceleration. Visitors to temporally active sites sometimes return with their health conditions dramatically improved, as if their bodies had been given extra time to heal within the compressed temporal fields. Others report pregnancies that progress at abnormal rates, either accelerating toward birth or remaining stable far beyond normal gestation periods. Electronic equipment malfunctions predictably at these locations, but not randomly. Atomic clocks slow down or speed up in patterns that suggest interaction with organized temporal fields rather than simple electromagnetic interference. Digital cameras capture images that show temporal layering, multiple time periods superimposed in single frames, creating photographs that reveal the past and present simultaneously. The mathematical precision of these temporal effects suggests conscious design rather than natural anomaly. The time distortions follow specific ratios that relate to sacred geometries, astronomical cycles, and harmonic frequencies found throughout nature. The sites appear to function as temporal instruments, carefully calibrated to produce specific consciousness effects through manipulation of time flow. Indigenous shamans and traditional spiritual practitioners speak of these temporal anomalies as natural features of sacred space, not as aberrations requiring explanation. Their traditions describe time as fluid rather than linear, capable of pooling, eddying, and flowing in complex patterns around locations of spiritual significance. From this perspective, the challenge is not explaining how time can be manipulated, but understanding why some places have retained their natural temporal fluidity, while others have been locked into linear progression. The implications for consciousness research are profound. If awareness can experience extended subjective time within brief, objective intervals, what does this suggest about the relationship between mind and temporality? Perhaps consciousness itself exists partially outside linear time, using temporal distortions at sacred sites to access its own timeless nature. Time flows like water around islands of the sacred, creating eddies where past and future swirl together. In the remote mountains of Peru, where ancient Inca roads wind through clouds that seem older than civilization itself, something extraordinary occurred to Dr. Elena Vasquez in 1998, a linguistic anthropologist who had spent her career studying dead languages. She entered the ruins of an unnamed temple complex and found herself suddenly, inexplicably fluent in a dialect that had not been spoken for over 500 years. The words flowed from her lips without conscious thought, carrying meanings she understood with perfect clarity. Despite having no prior exposure to the language, Dr. Vasquez was not alone in this experience. Around the world, at sites both famous and forgotten, visitors report similar phenomena of spontaneous knowledge, acquisition complex information that appears in consciousness without any conventional learning process. These instances of direct knowing transcend cultural and linguistic barriers, suggesting mechanisms of information transfer that operate beyond the normal boundaries of individual memory and Education. The phenomena manifest most commonly in connection with ancient spiritual practices and forgotten ceremonial traditions. At Stonehenge, modern Druids describe receiving detailed instructions for rituals that were supposedly lost when the original priesthood vanished from history. The information arrives complete with specific timing, proper invocations, and intricate ceremonial procedures that prove historically accurate when compared with fragmentary archaeological evidence in Egypt. Visitors to the Great Pyramid often emerge with profound understanding of ancient Egyptian mystical practices, complete with knowledge of symbolic correspondences, meditation techniques, and spiritual exercises that were supposedly secret initiatory teachings available only to trained priests. These spontaneous initiations occur without books, teachers, or any form of conventional instruction, as if the monument itself serves as a three-dimensional repository of the consciousness-encoded information. The accuracy of this spontaneously acquired knowledge often proves verifiable through independent research. Individuals who receive information about astronomical cycles, mathematical relationships, or historical events frequently provide details that can be confirmed through scholarly investigation. In some cases, the information received proves more accurate than existing academic consensus, leading to revised understanding of ancient cultures and their capabilities. Perhaps most remarkable are the instances where multiple individuals visiting the same site at different times and without communication between them receive identical information. At Delphi, the ancient oracle site, modern visitors consistently report receiving the same mythological narratives, symbolic interpretations, and philosophical insights. The consistency of these independent revelations suggests that some locations might function as stable information fields, maintaining coherent datasets that remain accessible across centuries. The phenomenon appears to be selective, manifesting primarily in individuals who approach sacred sites with genuine reverence and spiritual openness. Skeptical visitors rarely experience spontaneous knowledge acquisition, while those who enter with meditative awareness and respectful intention frequently receive profound downloads of information. This selectivity suggests that consciousness state might determine accessibility to these mysterious knowledge repositories. Some researchers propose that the sites themselves function as naturally occurring libraries, their stone structures somehow encoding and preserving information through mechanisms we don't yet understand. The megalithic monuments might represent an ancient information storage technology that uses consciousness as both the reading device and the security system, granting access only to individuals whose awareness matches specific frequencies or intentions. The content of these knowledge downloads often includes practical information that would have been essential to the site's original inhabitants. Visitors receive detailed understanding of construction techniques, astronomical calculations, medicinal practices, and spiritual disciplines that enabled ancient cultures to create and maintain their sacred centers. It's as if the locations themselves serve as instruction manuals for their own proper use and maintenance. Traditional, indigenous perspectives offer alternative explanations for these phenomena. Many native traditions describe sacred sites as nodes in a vast network of Earth consciousness, places where the planet's own memory becomes accessible to human awareness. From this viewpoint, the sites don't contain information so much as they facilitate connection to the living memory of the Earth itself. The temporal aspects of this phenomenon add another layer of mystery. Individuals sometimes receive information about future events, technological developments, or cultural changes that haven't yet occurred. These prophetic downloads prove accurate with such consistency that they suggest access not just to historical memory, but to probability patterns that extend into possible futures. The psychological impact of these experiences often proves transformative, fundamentally altering recipients' understanding of consciousness, reality, and their own potential. Many describe the knowledge acquisition as recognition rather than learning, as if they were remembering information they had always known but had somehow forgotten. This quality of familiarity suggests that the phenomenon might involve accessing universal knowledge that exists within all consciousness, but remains normally inaccessible to individual awareness. The biological mechanisms underlying these experiences remain mysterious, but brain imaging studies of individuals during spontaneous knowledge acquisition show activation patterns that resemble those observed during mystical states and deep meditation. The same neural networks that process transcendent experiences appear to be involved in accessing information that exists outside normal memory systems. Knowledge seeks its own expression, flowing through minds prepared to receive what was never meant to be taught. In a field outside the village of Rennes-le-Château in southern France, there stands nothing that the eye can see. No walls rise from the earth, no columns support absent roofs, no altars mark sacred spaces. Yet visitors to this unremarkable location consistently report one of the most profound spiritual experiences of their lives. They describe walking through elaborate cathedral spaces, sensing towering walls of light, feeling the presence of invisible architectural grandeur that creates the same sense of awe and reverence that physical cathedrals inspire through stone and stained glass. The phenomenon is not unique to this French countryside. Across the globe, in locations marked by no visible structures, people encounter what can only be described as invisible architecture spaces that exist purely in consciousness, yet feel as solid and real as any physical building. These ethereal sanctuaries possess distinct characteristics: soaring heights that dwarf the grandest cathedrals, acoustic properties that amplify whispered prayers into resonant choruses, and geometric proportions that induce profound states of transcendence. At Glastonbury Tor in England, the ancient tower stands as the only visible remnant of what was once a baby complex. Yet visitors consistently describe walking through vast invisible halls that surround the physical structure, chambers of light that seem to exist in the same space as the empty air. The invisible architecture follows the proportions of sacred geometry, creating spaces that feel both intimately personal and cosmically vast. The consistency of these reports is remarkable. Independent visitors, separated by years and having no knowledge of others' experiences, describe identical architectural details: the placement of invisible doorways, the height of non-existent ceilings, the location of ethereal chapels within the greater invisible structure. Maps drawn by different individuals match with startling precision, suggesting that these consciousness-based buildings possess stable, coherent designs that persist across time. Some locations seem to host multiple layers of invisible architecture, as if different time periods or spiritual traditions have built overlapping structures in the same space. At sites like Delphi, visitors report encountering Greek temples, Byzantine churches, and modern spiritual spaces existing simultaneously in the same location, each accessible depending on the consciousness frequency of the observer. The invisible architecture becomes a kind of temporal palimpsest, with each era adding its own layer to the accumulated spiritual energy of the place. The psychological impact of entering these invisible cathedrals often proves more profound than visiting the most magnificent physical structures. Visitors describe feeling embraced by walls of pure love, supported by pillars of crystallized prayer, and illuminated by light that seems to emanate from the very substance of consciousness itself. The experience transcends the purely visual or tactile, engaging aspects of awareness that have no correspondence in ordinary physical perception. Electronic equipment provides intriguing confirmation of these phenomena. Electromagnetic field detectors register organized patterns in areas where invisible architecture is perceived, showing structured variations that mirror the geometries described by sensitive visitors. Infrared cameras sometimes capture heat, signatures that correspond to the reported architectural forms, as if the invisible structures possess some form of energetic substance that interacts with physical measurement devices. The acoustic properties of these spaces prove particularly fascinating. In areas of reported invisible architecture, sound behaves in ways that suggest the presence of actual walls, ceilings, and chambers. Voices carry and echo as if reflecting off invisible surfaces, creating reverberation patterns that match the architectural descriptions provided by psychically sensitive visitors. The sound seems to understand the presence of structures that exist only in consciousness. Traditional spiritual practices from around the world recognize these phenomena as natural expressions of sacred space. Tibetan Buddhism speaks of pure lands that exist in consciousness and can be accessed through proper meditation. Hindu traditions describe astral temples that parallel physical sacred sites, existing in subtle dimensions that interpenetrate physical reality. Native American traditions recognize power spots, where the spirit world becomes accessible to human consciousness. The construction of these invisible cathedrals appears to be an ongoing process, with new architectural elements appearing over time in response to the spiritual needs and activities of visitors. Prayer and meditation seem to literally build structure in these spaces, adding rooms, altars, and ceremonial areas that become accessible to future visitors. The architecture grows organically, shaped by the collective spiritual intentions of all who enter these sacred spaces. The materials of these invisible buildings possess qualities that transcend physical matter. Visitors describe walls of crystallized intention, columns of accumulated prayer, and windows that open onto landscapes of pure possibility. The architecture seems to be constructed from consciousness itself, using devotion as mortar and reverence as foundation stone. Some researchers propose that these invisible cathedrals represent the true nature of all sacred architecture, that physical buildings are merely crude approximations of spiritual structures that exist primarily in consciousness. The most magnificent temples and cathedrals might be successful precisely because they manage to approximate, in stone and glass, the invisible geometries that naturally arise when consciousness encounters the sacred. The phenomenon raises profound questions about the relationship between mind and space. If consciousness can create architectural experiences indistinguishable from physical reality, what does this suggest about the nature of space itself? Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of these invisible cathedrals is not that they exist without physical substance, but that they demonstrate consciousness's ability to create meaningful, consistent, and transformative spatial experiences through pure intention and awareness. The builders of these consciousness-based sanctuaries appear to be the visitors themselves, each contributing to an evolving architectural form that transcends individual creation. The invisible cathedrals become collaborative projects spanning generations, with each sincere spiritual seeker adding their own contribution to structures that exist in the intersection between personal consciousness and universal sacred space. Walls of stone crumble with time, but some sanctuaries are built from materials that transcend decay. In the heart of the Sahara Desert, where the endless dunes stretch toward horizons that shimmer with heat and possibility, there exists a place where silence becomes a living presence. The Tuareg people call it Akalin Tafakt, the place of silence, and they speak of it in whispers, understanding that even the softest word carries too much weight for the profound quiet that dwells there. This is not merely the absence of sound, but the presence of something far more mysterious. Silence that seems to possess consciousness, intention, and the power to transform everything it touches. The phenomenon extends far beyond the deserts. Natural quiet. Visitors to this location describe entering a bubble of absolute silence that seems to exist independently of the surrounding environment. Wind that howls across the dunes falls silent at the boundary of this space. The crunch of sand beneath footsteps becomes muted, then disappears entirely. Even the sound of one's own breathing and heartbeat fades into the consuming quiet, leaving consciousness suspended in a void of auditory nothingness that paradoxically feels more alive than any symphony. This sacred silence possesses qualities that challenge our understanding of acoustics and perception. Unlike the dead quiet of an anechoic chamber, which feels oppressive and unnatural, the silence at these locations creates a sense of expansion, of connection to something infinitely vast and profoundly present. The absence of sound becomes a gateway to deeper listening, revealing layers of awareness that are normally masked by the constant noise of existence. Similar phenomena occur at sacred sites around the world, each with its own character and spiritual significance. In the depths of certain caves in Tibet, monks report entering chambers where silence becomes so complete that it seems to have physical weight, pressing against consciousness like a gentle but irresistible force. The walls of these chambers show no special acoustic properties when analyzed scientifically, yet they consistently produce effects that transform the experience of both sound and silence. The psychological impact of encountering sacred silence proves profound and often life-changing. Individuals who enter these zones of absolute quiet describe experiencing a fundamental shift in their relationship with sound, noise, and communication itself. Many report that after exposure to sacred silence, they can no longer tolerate the constant chatter of modern life, finding themselves drawn to increasingly quiet environments where they can reconnect with the transformative power of true stillness. The silence seems to respond to the consciousness of those who encounter it, becoming deeper and more profound in the presence of individuals who approach with reverence and understanding. Skeptical visitors often report experiencing nothing unusual, while those who enter with meditative awareness find themselves enveloped in quiet so complete that it seems to extend beyond the auditory realm into the very fabric of thought and perception. Some locations demonstrate the ability to create selective silence, muting certain sounds while allowing others to pass through unchanged. At Stonehenge, during specific astronomical alignments, visitors report that human voices disappear entirely while natural sounds wind. Bird songs, the rustle of grass remain audible. It's as if the silence possesses intelligence, choosing which sounds to absorb and which to preserve according to criteria that exist beyond human understanding. The temporal aspects of sacred silence add another layer of mystery. In some locations, the silence seems to exist outside normal time, creating spaces where moments stretch into subjective eternities of perfect quiet. Visitors emerge from these experiences feeling that they have spent hours or days in contemplative stillness, only to discover that mere minutes have passed in the outside world. Traditional spiritual practices recognize silence as more than the absence of sound. It's understood as the fundamental ground from which all sound emerges and to which it returns. From this perspective, sacred silence represents contact with the source of all vibration, all music, all language. The silence becomes a teacher, instructing consciousness in the art of listening not just with the ears, but with the entire being. The cultivation of sacred silence appears to be an active process that develops over time through the spiritual activities of visitors. Locations that are regularly used for meditation, prayer, and contemplative practice seem to gradually accumulate silence the way other places accumulate sound. The quiet deepens with each sincere spiritual encounter, creating reservoirs of stillness that can be accessed by future visitors. Electronic recording equipment behaves strangely in these environments, often capturing sounds that weren't audible. to human ears or failing to record sounds that were clearly heard. The silence seems to exist in a realm that intersects with but remains independent of the physical acoustics that govern normal sound propagation. Some researchers suggest that these phenomena might represent interactions with dimensions of reality that exist beyond the normal. Electromagnetic spectrum. The physiological effects of exposure to sacred silence include profound changes in brainwave patterns, with subjects showing increased alpha and theta wave activity associated with deep meditation and transcendent states. Heart rate and blood pressure often decrease significantly, while measurements of stress hormones show dramatic reductions. The silence appears to trigger natural healing responses that operate at the cellular level. The most profound aspect of these experiences might be the recognition that silence is not empty but full, pregnant with infinite possibility, rich with unmanifest potential, alive with the consciousness that underlies all existence. In the gentle embrace of sacred silence, the chattering mind learns to rest. The anxious heart finds peace, and awareness discovers its own essential nature as the silent witness that observes all experience without being touched by any of it. In the deepest silence, the heart learns to hear what words have never been able to express. In the basement archives of the University of Edinburgh, Dr. Malcolm Sinclair made a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his career. While researching medieval manuscripts, he uncovered a collection of documents that appeared to describe a completely different version of Scottish history, one in which the Battle of Culloden had never occurred, where the Jacobite cause had succeeded, and where Scotland had maintained its independence through a series of diplomatic victories that bore no resemblance to recorded events. The documents were authentic by every measure, available to forensic analysis. The parchment dated correctly to the 18th century, the ink composition matched period formulations, and the handwriting styles were consistent with the supposed time of creation. Yet the history they described was impossible, a parallel narrative that diverged from known events in ways that suggested not forgery or mistake, but genuine documentation of a timeline that had somehow never come to pass. Dr. Sinclair's discovery was not unique. Around the world, archaeologists and historians have encountered similar anomalies, artifacts, documents, and physical evidence that appear to chronicle events that never happened, at least not in the version of history that we collectively remember. These parallel histories possess a consistency and internal logic that distinguishes them from simple fantasy or deliberate deception, suggesting instead the existence of alternative timelines that somehow bleed through into our reality. The phenomena manifests most commonly at locations of great historical significance, places where pivotal events occurred that shaped the course of human civilization. At Gettysburg, metal detectors have uncovered bullets and military equipment that suggest battles fought with weapons that didn't exist during the Civil War era. The artifacts are genuine, proper aging, correct material composition, accurate manufacturing techniques, yet they document conflicts that historical records insist never occurred. In Egypt, archaeologists working in the Valley of the Kings have discovered hieroglyphic inscriptions that describe pharaohs who ruled during well-documented periods but whose names appear in no other historical source. The inscriptions are carved in authentic ancient Egyptian style, weathered appropriately for their supposed age. Yet they chronicle reigns that seem to have occurred in a parallel version of Egyptian history, where different individuals occupied the throne. The most intriguing aspect of these parallel histories is their internal consistency. When multiple artifacts from the same alternative timeline are discovered, they support and reinforce each other's narratives in ways that would be impossible if they were random fabrications. The alternative histories follow logical cause and effect. Relationships demonstrate consistent cultural developments and reflect the same underlying human patterns that characterize authentic historical progression. Some researchers propose that these artifacts represent evidence of quantum mechanics operating on a macroscopic historical scale. In quantum theory, particles exist in superposition states until observed, at which point they collapse into a single definite state. Perhaps historical events exist in similar superposition, with multiple possible outcomes coexisting until some form of collective observation collapses them into the single timeline we experience as real history. The discovery of parallel historical artifacts often coincides with reports of temporal anomalies at the same locations. Visitors to historically significant sites sometimes report witnessing events that don't match recorded history battles that unfolded differently, ceremonies that followed unfamiliar rituals, or interactions between historical figures who supposedly never met. These experiences suggest that some locations might serve as windows into alternative timelines, allowing glimpses of the history that might have been. The emotional impact of encountering parallel histories often proves profound, creating a sense of vertigo that extends beyond the intellectual challenge of reconciling impossible evidence. Witnesses describe feeling as if they're glimpsing the fundamental malleability of reality itself, recognizing that the solid certainty of historical fact might be far more fluid than commonly believed. The experience can be simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying, opening awareness to possibilities that challenge the basic assumptions about causality and linear time. Carbon dating of parallel historical artifacts produces results that are both accurate and impossible. The artifacts date correctly to their supposed historical periods, but they document events that contradict established chronologies. Some items show multiple dating results, as if they exist simultaneously in different time periods, defying the fundamental assumption that objects have single, linear histories. Indigenous oral traditions from various cultures speak of times when history branched or split, creating multiple streams of possibility that normally remain separate but occasionally intersect. These traditions describe certain locations as places where the boundaries between timelines become permeable, allowing artifacts and memories from alternative histories to cross over into our reality. The psychological profiles of individuals who discover parallel historical evidence show interesting patterns. Many are highly intuitive people who seem naturally attuned to temporal anomalies and alternative possibilities. They often report having had experiences throughout their lives that suggested reality was more fluid than commonly believed, making them more receptive to evidence that challenges conventional historical narratives. The implications for archaeology and historical research are staggering. If parallel timelines can leave physical evidence in our reality, how can we distinguish between authentic historical artifacts and items that document events that never occurred in our timeline? The very foundations of historical methodology might need to be reconsidered to account for the possibility that the past itself exists in multiple versions simultaneously. Perhaps the most profound insight emerging from these discoveries is that history might not be a fixed sequence of events, but a dynamic field of possibilities that continues to evolve based on our collective observation and interpretation. The parallel histories might represent not alternative pasts but alternative presents, showing us glimpses of the reality we might be living if our collective consciousness had made different choices about which possibilities to manifest. History writes itself in stone and bone, but some stories exist in the spaces between what was and what might have been. Maria Santos had never heard of Glastonbury Tor before the dreams began. Growing up in a small village in rural Brazil, she had no access to books about British sacred sites, no internet connection to reveal the ancient mysteries of Somerset. Yet every night for 7 years, from the age of 12 until 19, she dreamed of the same impossible landscape, a tall tower standing alone atop a green hill, surrounded by fields that seemed to pulse with an inner light she could feel. Even in sleep, the dreams possessed a quality that distinguished them from ordinary nighttime imagery. They felt more real than waking consciousness, more vivid than memory, more compelling than any experience in her daily life. In the dreams, she wasn't merely observing the landscape, but participating in it, walking ancient paths that her feet seemed to know by heart, climbing toward the tower with a sense of coming home that defied rational explanation. When Maria finally saw a photograph of Glastonbury tour at age 21, the recognition was instant and overwhelming. This was the place that had called to her across an ocean, the landscape that had shaped her inner world throughout her adolescence. Against all logic and practicality, she saved money for 3 years to make the journey from Brazil to England, driven by a certainty that she belonged to that place in ways she couldn't begin to explain. Her experience upon reaching Glastonbury proved even more extraordinary than the dreams that had led her there. The moment she set foot on the tour, she felt a homecoming so profound that it reduced her to tears. The landscape itself seemed to recognize her presence, the very stones appearing to welcome her return. Local residents, many of whom had lived in Glastonbury their entire lives, commented on how naturally she moved through the area, as if she had been born there. Maria's story represents a pattern that occurs around the world at sacred sites of particular power. Individuals with no prior knowledge of specific locations find themselves inexplicably drawn to these places, often from childhood, through dreams, visions, or simply an unshakable sense that they belong somewhere they've never been. The phenomenon transcends cultural boundaries, economic circumstances, and geographical distances, suggesting forces that operate beyond the normal mechanisms of human attraction and migration. The calling often manifests earliest in childhood, before rational thought can dismiss the experience as impossible. Children draw pictures of places they've never seen, speak of home in landscapes that exist thousands of miles away, or express profound longing for specific geographical features that have no connection to their family history or cultural background. The consistency of these early callings suggests that some form of soul geography operates independently of physical birth and upbringing. Research into these phenomena has revealed fascinating patterns. Individuals who feel called to specific sacred sites often discover, upon visiting, that they possess unusual sensitivity to the location's energy fields, acoustic properties, or temporal anomalies. It's as if the sites choose their visitors based on psychic compatibility, calling to those who can most fully experience and appreciate their mysteries. The time lag between the initial calling and the eventual visit varies dramatically, sometimes spanning decades or entire lifetimes. Some individuals report feeling called to places they don't visit until retirement, while others arrange their entire lives around reaching locations that have haunted their dreams since childhood. The persistence of these callings suggests that the connection between soul and place operates on timescales that extend far beyond individual human lifespans. The phenomenon appears to be hereditary in some families, with multiple generations feeling drawn to the same sacred sites. Grandmothers, mothers, and daughters report dreaming of identical landscapes, sometimes without discussing their visions with each other. When these family connections are finally revealed, they often explain long-standing patterns of restlessness, wandering, or spiritual seeking that have characterized the family lineage. The emotional impact of reaching a place that has called to you across years or decades proves consistently transformative. Visitors describe experiences of profound recognition, as if recovering lost memories or returning to relationships that had been temporarily interrupted. Many report immediate changes in their spiritual awareness, creative abilities, or life direction upon visiting their calling places. Some locations seem to call to individuals for specific purposes, summoning people who possess particular skills, knowledge, or spiritual gifts that the sites require. Artists find themselves drawn to places where they create their most important works, healers to locations where their abilities become amplified, and scholars to sites where they make their most significant discoveries. The sacred geography appears to participate actively in human spirit. Maria Santos had never heard of Glastonbury Tor before the dreams began. Growing up in a small village in rural Brazil, she had no access to books about British sacred sites, no internet connection to reveal the ancient mysteries of Somerset. Yet every night for 7 years, from the age of 12 until 19, she dreamed of the same impossible landscape, a tall tower standing alone atop a green hill, surrounded by fields that seemed to pulse with an inner light she could feel. Even in sleep, the dreams possessed a quality that distinguished them from ordinary nighttime imagery. They felt more real than waking consciousness, more vivid than memory, more compelling than any experience in her daily life. In the dreams, she wasn't merely observing the landscape, but participating in it, walking ancient paths that her feet seemed to know by heart, climbing toward the tower with a sense of coming home that defied rational explanation. When Maria finally saw a photograph of Glastonbury Tor at age 21, the recognition was instant and overwhelming. This was the place that had called to her across an ocean, the landscape that had shaped her inner world throughout her adolescence. Against all logic and practicality, she saved money for 3 years to make the journey from Brazil to England, driven by a certainty that she belonged to that place in ways she couldn't begin to explain. Her experience upon reaching Glastonbury proved even more extraordinary than the dream. Dr. Catherine Winters, a material scientist at MIT, had spent her career studying the behavior of exotic matter under extreme conditions. She had analyzed meteorite fragments, synthesized novel crystalline structures, and explored the properties of materials that existed only in laboratory conditions. Nothing in her extensive training had prepared her for what she discovered in a small vial of water collected from the sacred spring at Lourdes. Under spectroscopic analysis, the water revealed trace amounts of a substance that should not exist. On Earth, the molecular structure was unlike anything in the periodic table, displaying properties that suggested it existed partially in our three-dimensional space and partially in dimensions that mathematics could describe, but physical science could not access. When exposed to specific frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, the substance glowed with an inner light that seemed to originate from within the molecular bonds themselves. Dr. Winters' discovery represented the first scientific documentation of a phenomenon that had been reported for centuries at sacred sites around the world: the presence of mysterious substances that possess properties beyond conventional material science. These materials appear to exist at the intersection of the physical and metaphysical realms, displaying characteristics that challenge our understanding of what matter can be and do. The substances manifest in various forms, each with its own unique properties and patterns of occurrence. At certain sacred wells, the water contains microscopic crystalline structures that form geometric patterns of impossible complexity. These crystals seem to grow according to mathematical principles that transcend normal crystallography, creating forms that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When dissolved in ordinary water, they transfer their unusual properties to the entire solution, creating liquid that behaves as if it retains memory of its encounter with the extraordinary in caves beneath sacred mountains. Researchers have discovered metallic deposits that demonstrate room temperature superconductivity, levitation properties, and the ability to store vast amounts of electromagnetic energy. The metals appear to be composed of familiar elements arranged in configurations that shouldn't be stable under normal conditions. Yet they maintain their impossible properties indefinitely, as if they exist in a state of perpetual quantum coherence that defies thermal and electromagnetic interference. The most remarkable of these substances might be the liquid light. Reported at various sacred sites, a material that appears to be water but behaves like liquid crystal, bending light in ways that create rainbow effects and holographic displays. When contained in transparent vessels, the liquid light creates constantly shifting patterns of color and luminescence that seem to respond to the consciousness of observers. The patterns become more complex and beautiful in the presence of individuals who approach with reverence and spiritual awareness. These substances seem to precipitate from consciousness itself, appearing in locations where intense spiritual practices have been conducted over extended periods. The correlation between the depth of spiritual activity at a site and the complexity of the unusual materials found there suggests that consciousness might be capable of literally crystallizing into physical form under certain conditions. The temporal behavior of these materials adds another layer to their mystery. Some substances age backwards, becoming more refined and complex over time rather than degrading. Others exist in temporal loops, repeatedly cycling through the same sequence of transformations without any apparent energy input. A few demonstrate the ability to exist in multiple time states simultaneously, appearing ancient and newly formed at the same moment. The healing properties of these materials extend far beyond anything that conventional medicine can explain. Water containing trace amounts of the unusual substances has been documented to accelerate cellular regeneration, enhance immune function, and facilitate psychological healing in ways that suggest direct interaction with the body's fundamental organizational patterns. The substances seem to carry information that helps biological systems remember their optimal states of health and balance. The production of these materials appears to require specific consciousness conditions rather than particular physical environments. Locations where they appear most frequently are characterized not by unique geological features, but by the quality of spiritual awareness that they inspire. The materials manifest most readily in the presence of individuals who have achieved states of consciousness that transcend ordinary waking awareness. Scientific attempts to synthesize these substances in laboratory conditions have uniformly failed, suggesting that their creation requires factors that exist beyond the realm of conventional physics and chemistry. The materials seem to be products of interactions between consciousness, intention, and matter that operate according to principles we have yet to discover or understand. The substances demonstrate an apparent intelligence, changing their properties in response to the needs and intentions of those who encounter them. Water from sacred springs has been observed to adjust its mineral content to match the specific healing requirements of individual users. Crystalline substances have shown the ability to grow in patterns that mirror the psychological and spiritual states of nearby observers. The implications for our understanding of consciousness and matter are profound. If awareness can literally crystallize into physical form, what does this suggest about the fundamental nature of reality? Perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of these materials is not their impossible properties, but their demonstration that the boundary between mind and matter might be far more permeable than we have assumed. The artisans of these liquid starlight creations appear to be the sacred sites themselves, working in collaboration with human consciousness to produce materials that serve as bridges between the physical and spiritual realms. These substances represent not just scientific anomalies, but artistic expressions of the creative partnership between awareness and matter, demonstrations of what becomes possible when consciousness learns to dance with the basic building blocks of reality. Matter and spirit dance together in ways that science has only begun to glimpse, creating substances that exist at the intersection of dream and reality. In the Highlands of Scotland, where mist clings to ancient stones like the breath of sleeping giants, there exists a stone circle that appears to defy the basic laws of three-dimensional space. The Ring of Brogger, with its perfectly aligned megalithic stones, creates optical illusions that suggest the builders understood geometric principles that modern mathematics has only begun to explore. Visitors walking around the circle report that the stones seem to exist in more than 3 dimensions, creating perspectives and alignments that should be impossible given their actual physical positions. The phenomenon extends far beyond visual tricks or perceptual errors. Precise surveying equipment confirms that the stones are positioned according to mathematical relationships that require understanding of non-Euclidean geometry, hyperbolic space, and dimensional folding. The alignments create what mathematicians call impossible objects, configurations, that can exist in theoretical space, but shouldn't be achievable with physical materials in our three-dimensional reality. Similar geometric anomalies appear at sacred sites around the world, each displaying mathematical relationships that seem to transcend the limitations of ordinary space. At Stonehenge, the arrangement of stones creates sightlines that converge at points that exist both inside and outside the circle simultaneously. The geometry suggests that the builders had access to mathematical concepts that wouldn't be formally discovered until the development of modern topology and quantum mechanics. The most striking examples occur in the sacred architecture of ancient cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the temples of Angkor Wat, and the stone circles of Britain all incorporate identical mathematical constants and geometric relationships, suggesting either direct communication between widely separated civilizations or access to universal mathematical principles that transcend cultural boundaries. These impossible geometries seem to create effects that extend beyond the purely visual. Visitors to sites with non-Euclidean architecture frequently report experiences of spatial disorientation that feel more like expansion than confusion. The geometric impossibilities appear to trigger states of consciousness that transcend normal three-dimensional awareness, allowing perception of spatial relationships that exist in higher dimensions. The phenomenon manifests most clearly in structures designed for spiritual or ceremonial purposes. Sacred architecture around the world consistently displays geometric properties that seem designed to induce altered states of consciousness through spatial relationships that challenge ordinary perception. The buildings become instruments for expanding awareness beyond the limitations of normal three-dimensional thinking. Some of these structures appear to create localized distortions in space itself. Photography at certain angles reveals architectural elements that seem to exist in multiple positions simultaneously, creating images that appear to violate the basic principles of perspective and spatial relationships. The distortions are consistent and reproducible, suggesting systematic geometric principles rather than random anomalies. The mathematical analysis of these structures reveals the use of transcendental numbers and geometric relationships that shouldn't have been known to ancient builders. The golden ratio pi and the square root of in the highlands of Scotland, where mist clings to ancient stones like the breath of sleeping giants, there exists a stone circle that appears to defy the basic laws of three-dimensional space. The Ring of Brogger, with its perfectly aligned megalithic stones, creates optical illusions that suggest the builders understood geometric principles that modern mathematics has only begun to explore. Visitors walking around the circle report that the stones seem to exist in more than 3 dimensions, creating perspectives and alignments that should be impossible given their actual physical positions. The phenomenon extends far beyond visual tricks or perceptual errors. Precise surveying equipment confirms that the stones are positioned according to mathematical relationships that require understanding of non-Euclidean geometry, hyperbolic space, and dimensional folding. The alignments create what mathematicians call impossible objects, configurations, that can exist in theoretical space, but shouldn't be achievable with physical materials in our three-dimensional reality. Similar geometric anomalies appear at sacred sites around the world, each displaying mathematical relationships that seem to transcend the limitations of ordinary space. At Stonehenge, the arrangement of stones creates sightlines that converge at points that exist both inside and outside the circle simultaneously. The geometry suggests that the builders had access to mathematical concepts that wouldn't be formally discovered until the development of modern topology and quantum mechanics. The most striking examples occur in the sacred architecture of ancient cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the temples of Angkor Wat, and the stone circles of Britain all incorporate identical mathematical constants and geometric relationships, suggesting either direct communication between widely separated civilizations or access to universal mathematical principles that transcend cultural boundaries. These impossible geometries seem to create effects that extend beyond the purely visual. Visitors to sites with non-Euclidean architecture frequently report experiences of spatial disorientation that feel more like expansion than confusion. The geometric impossibilities appear to trigger states of consciousness that transcend normal three-dimensional awareness, allowing perception of spatial relationships that exist in higher dimensions. The phenomenon manifests most clearly in structures designed for spiritual or ceremonial purposes. Sacred architecture around the world consistently displays geometric properties that seem designed to induce altered states of consciousness through spatial relationships that challenge ordinary perception. The buildings become instruments for expanding awareness beyond the limitations of normal three-dimensional thinking. Some of these structures appear to create localized distortions in space itself. Photography at certain angles reveals architectural elements that seem to exist in multiple positions simultaneously, creating images that appear to violate the basic principles of. At precisely 3:17 a.m. on November 11, 1993, something extraordinary occurred in the ancient Cathedral of Chartres. Sister Marie Claire, a Benedictine nun who had spent 30 years in contemplative prayer, was maintaining her vigil in the sacred space when time itself seemed to pause. The moment stretched into eternity, holding her in a state of suspended animation where her consciousness existed in the eternal present, while her body remained frozen in the act of genuflection. When the moment finally released her, Sister Marie Claire discovered that she had experienced what felt like hours of profound spiritual communion, yet the cathedral clock showed that only a single second had passed. More mysteriously, the same frozen moment appeared to be continuing for other visitors who had been present in the cathedral. Throughout the night, different individuals emerged from the same temporal suspension, each reporting identical experiences of extended spiritual encounter within the space of a single shared moment. This phenomenon represents one of the most mysterious aspects of sacred site experiences, the preservation of specific moments in time that become accessible to multiple visitors across years or even decades. These threshold moments seem to exist outside normal temporal flow, creating pockets of experience that can be entered and re-entered like rooms in a house of memory. The phenomenon occurs most frequently at locations where events of profound spiritual significance have taken place. The moments that become preserved are typically those of intense transcendence, breakthrough insight, or spiritual transformation. It's as if the consciousness-altering power of these experiences is sufficient to create permanent alterations in the fabric of time itself. leaving temporal footprints that future visitors can step into and experience as their own dot at the site of Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya. Visitors from around the world report entering a specific moment of profound awakening. That seems to be the same experience regardless of when they visit. The moment possesses consistent characteristics: a sense of all suffering dissolving, understanding of the interconnectedness of all existence, and a love so profound it encompasses the entire cosmos. The experience is so consistent that it suggests access to the actual moment of Buddha's enlightenment, preserved in time and made available to sincere seekers. The preserved moments don't always represent positive experiences. At locations where great suffering has occurred, visitors sometimes find themselves experiencing threshold moments of profound grief, terror, or despair. These moments seem to serve as teaching experiences, allowing contemporary consciousness to directly understand the full impact of historical events in ways that mere intellectual knowledge cannot provide. The mechanism by which these moments become preserved appears to be related to the intensity of consciousness, focused at specific locations during significant events. When awareness reaches certain levels of intensity, it seems to create permanent impressions in the time-space continuum that remain accessible to future visitors who achieve similar states of consciousness. The experience of entering a threshold moment is unmistakable. Visitors report a sensation of stepping outside normal time into a space where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. Within these moments, they often encounter the consciousness of individuals who were present during the original events, creating opportunities for direct communication across centuries or millennia. Some threshold moments appear to be created specifically for future visitors, as if enlightened beings deliberately preserved certain experiences for the benefit of those who would come later. The most profound teachers seem to have understood how to encode their highest realizations into the fabric of time itself, creating gifts that could be unwrapped by future seekers ready to receive them. The collective nature of some threshold moments suggests that certain experiences are too significant for linear time to contain. Moments of mass spiritual awakening, collective revelation, or shared transcendence seem to create temporal fields that can accommodate multiple consciousness streams simultaneously. These shared moments allow groups of people to participate in the same experience despite visiting at different times. The preservation of threshold moments appears to be selective, with only experiences that reach specific levels of spiritual intensity becoming permanently encoded in time. Ordinary consciousness rarely creates temporal impressions, but awareness states characterized by selfless love, profound understanding, or complete surrender to the sacred seem to possess the transformative power necessary to alter time itself. Phenomenon has practical implications for spiritual development and consciousness research. If moments of transcendence can be preserved and accessed by future visitors, sacred sites might function as libraries of consciousness, storing the highest realizations of human awareness for those who seek them. The preservation of threshold moments represents a form of temporal technology that allows direct transmission of spiritual experience across time. The biological effects of entering preserved moments include dramatic changes in brain chemistry, hormone levels, and cellular function. Visitors often experience healing, rejuvenation, and enhanced awareness that persists long after leaving the sacred sites. The threshold moments seem to carry not just experiential content but actual transformative power that can permanently alter consciousness. The most profound threshold moments appear to be those that exist in eternal, present-tense experiences, so complete and perfect that they transcend the very concept of temporal duration. These moments don't last for specific periods, but exist as eternal constants that consciousness can access when it reaches sufficient depth and clarity. The recognition that certain moments can be preserved and shared across time challenges are understanding of both consciousness and temporality. Perhaps the most precious experiences in human existence are not lost to the past, but remain eternally available to those who develop the awareness necessary to access them. Some moments are too precious for time to claim, existing instead in eternal present tense. In the remote mountains of Peru, where the air grows thin and the boundary between earth and sky seems to dissolve, there exists a place that the Quechua people call Hatten Same, the Great Breath. Visitors to this seemingly ordinary valley report experiences that transcend the normal boundaries of individual consciousness, finding their awareness expanding beyond personal identity into states of cosmic consciousness that encompass the entire universe. The phenomenon is not unique to the Andes. Around the world, certain locations consistently induce profound expansions of consciousness in visitors who approach them with openness and reverence. These places seem to function as natural amplifiers of human awareness, facilitating access to states of consciousness that typically require years of intensive spiritual practice to achieve. The consciousness expansion occurs through mechanisms that appear to be built into the very fabric of these locations. The sites possess specific combinations of geological formations, electromagnetic properties, and subtle energy fields that create optimal conditions for transcendent experiences. It's as if the Earth itself has created specialized environments designed to nurture the development of human consciousness. At Mount Kailash in Tibet, pilgrims report that the simple act of approaching the sacred mountain triggers spontaneous expansions of awareness that last for weeks or months after their return home. The mountain seems to function as a consciousness catalyst, activating dormant potentials within human awareness that might otherwise remain undeveloped throughout entire lifetimes. The psychological profiles of individuals who experience consciousness expansion at these sites reveal fascinating patterns. While some visitors are already advanced spiritual practitioners, many are ordinary people with no particular background in meditation or consciousness exploration. The sites appear to be democratically accessible, offering transformative experiences to anyone who approaches with genuine openness rather than requiring specific preparation or credentials. The content of these expanded consciousness experiences shows remarkable consistency across cultures, languages, and individual backgrounds. Visitors report profound realizations about the interconnectedness of all existence, direct experience of unconditional love as the fundamental force in the universe, and understanding of cosmic principles that transcend ordinary intellectual knowledge. The consistency suggests that these sites provide access to universal aspects of consciousness rather than culturally conditioned experiences. The duration of consciousness expansion varies dramatically between individuals and locations. Some visitors report brief moments of cosmic awareness that last only seconds but provide insights that influence their entire lives. Others describe sustained periods of expanded consciousness that continue for days or weeks, fundamentally altering their relationship with reality and their understanding of their place in the cosmos. The biological correlates of these experiences include profound changes in brain activity, with neuroimaging studies showing increased connectivity between normally isolated brain regions. The consciousness expansion appears to create new neural pathways that remain active long after the original experience, suggesting that the sites might facilitate permanent upgrades to human cognitive and spiritual capabilities. The sites themselves seem to respond to the consciousness levels of their visitors, becoming more active and accessible in the presence of individuals who have achieved higher states of awareness. Advanced practitioners report that the sites reveal deeper levels of consciousness expansion, as if the locations possess infinite depths that can accommodate any level of spiritual development. The acoustic properties of these consciousess expanding Locations often include infrasonic frequencies that correlate with brainwave patterns of transcendent states. The sites seem to use sound as a direct interface with human consciousness, entraining brain activity to frequencies that facilitate expanded awareness. Visitors often report hearing cosmic music or universal harmonics that seem to emanate from the landscape itself. The preservation of consciousness expanding effects appears to be cumulative, with sites becoming more powerful as more individuals experience transcendent states there. The accumulated spiritual energy of thousands of consciousness expansion experiences seems to create increasingly potent fields that facilitate access to higher states of awareness for future visitors. The phenomenon appears to be reciprocal, with expanded human consciousness contributing to the development of the sites themselves. Locations where many individuals have achieved transcendent states become increasingly capable of facilitating consciousness expansion, creating positive feedback loops that enhance both human spiritual development and the Earth's own conscious evolution. The integration of expanded consciousness experiences into ordinary life represents one of the most significant challenges faced by visitors to these sites. The profound realizations achieved during consciousness expansion can be difficult to maintain in the context of normal social and professional responsibilities. Many visitors report feeling like they're living in two different worlds, struggling to bridge the gap between cosmic consciousness and mundane reality. In the sacred grove of Dodona, where Zeus once spoke through rustling oak leaves, modern pilgrims report an extraordinary phenomenon that challenges our understanding of communication itself. They describe receiving vast, complex insights not through words or images, but through a form of knowing that bypasses the mind's usual processing channels entirely. This wordless language emerges from the very stones and trees, conveying meanings that would require volumes to express in human speech, yet arrive complete and perfect in a single moment of understanding. The phenomenon extends far beyond Greece's ancient oracle sites. At Machu Picchu, visitors consistently report conversations with the mountain itself, not auditory exchanges, but profound dialogues conducted through shifts in consciousness, changes in the quality of light, and subtle alterations in the electromagnetic field surrounding the ancient stones. These communications carry information about the site's history, purpose, and the civilizations that once walked its terraced pathways, delivered not as stories, but as direct experiential knowledge. Scientists studying these locations have documented measurable changes in visitors' brainwave patterns, particularly in regions associated with language processing and intuitive insight. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a neurolinguist who has spent decades investigating consciousness-based communication, notes that subjects at these sites show synchronized activity between normally independent neural networks, as if the brain is learning to process information through channels it doesn't typically use. The implications stretch beyond mere curiosity. Indigenous shamans from various traditions speak of earth languages communication, systems that predate human speech and operate through resonance rather than symbols. These practitioners describe learning to read the intentions of landscapes, to understand the emotional states of forests, and to receive guidance from geographical features that have witnessed the passage of countless generations. At Stonehenge, acoustic researchers have discovered that the monument's unique stone composition creates subtle infrasonic frequencies that may influence human consciousness in ways that facilitate this wordless communication. The stones seem to generate a form of carrier wave that allows consciousness to interface directly with the site's accumulated wisdom, bypassing the limitations of verbal translation. The Aboriginal Australians speak of country that talks not metaphorically, but as a literal description of landscapes that communicate through dreamtime consciousness. Songlines, the invisible pathways across the land, represent one attempt to translate these wordless conversations into human cultural memory. Yet even these sacred songs acknowledge that the full communication remains beyond the grasp of words. Existing in the spaces between verses, in the silence that gives meaning to the melody. Modern visitors to Uluru report similar experiences, describing the monolith as a vast consciousness that shares its perspectives through direct transmission. They speak of understanding the rock's experience of geological time, its awareness of the star patterns that have wheeled overhead for millions of years, and its intimate knowledge of every creature that is sheltered in its shadow. This information arrives not as abstract concepts, but as lived experience, as if consciousness itself becomes the medium through which such vast perspectives can be temporarily shared. Quantum physicists propose that consciousness may operate as a fundamental field, similar to electromagnetic or gravitational fields, capable of carrying information in ways that transcend the physical limitations of brain-based processing. At certain locations, this field may become concentrated or amplified, allowing for direct consciousness-to-consciousness communication that bypasses the usual channels of sensory perception and linguistic interpretation. The experience transforms those who encounter it. Many report a profound expansion of their understanding of intelligence itself, recognizing that consciousness may be far more widely distributed throughout the natural world than human-centered perspectives typically acknowledge. Trees, stones, landscapes, and even entire ecosystems begin to reveal themselves as conscious entities with their own forms of awareness and communication. This wordless language appears to operate on principles of resonance and recognition rather than transmission and reception. The information doesn't come from outside but seems to arise from within, as if the sacred sites activate dormant capacities for direct knowing that exist within human consciousness itself. The places serve as catalysts, awakening abilities that have always been present but rarely accessed in ordinary states of awareness. As we drift towards sleep, consider that every night, consciousness navigates realms where words hold no meaning. Yet profound communication continues. Dreams speak their own wordless languages, conveying experiences and insights that resist translation into waking vocabulary. Perhaps these sacred sites simply offer us glimpses of communication methods that consciousness naturally employs when freed from the constraints of physical embodiment. The greatest mystery may be that consciousness seeks to know itself through every possible medium, and when words prove inadequate, it finds other ways to share its infinite stories. In the silence between heartbeats, in the pause between thoughts, these wordless languages continue their eternal conversations, waiting for those who have learned to listen with more than their ears. Words are bridges built over the river of silence, but some meanings can only cross by swimming. In the healing chambers of Lords, statisticians have documented something that challenges the very foundations of probability theory. Medically verified healings occur at rates that should be mathematically impossible, as if the act of pilgrimage itself rewrites the basic rules governing physical reality. Yet this phenomenon extends far beyond religious sites, manifesting wherever human consciousness encounters places that have been designated as sacred across generations of human experience. The Sanctuary of Chimayo in New Mexico presents a particularly compelling case study. Here, the famous healing dirt soil from a specific location within the chapel has been associated with thousands of reported miracles over the past 2 centuries. Geologists have found nothing unusual about the Earth's composition, yet the statistical clustering of extraordinary events around this location defies conventional explanation. Wheelchairs, crutches, and medical braces cover the walls, mute testimony to transformations that probability mathematics suggests should never occur. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake's research into morphic fields offers one framework for understanding these probability anomalies. His work suggests that consciousness may operate through fields that influence the likelihood of specific outcomes, creating zones where intention and expectation can literally reshape the possible. At certain locations, the accumulated intention of countless pilgrims may create morphic fields so concentrated that they begin to influence the basic probabilities governing physical reality. The phenomenon isn't limited to healing at sacred sites worldwide. Visitors report synchronicities, meaningful coincidences at rates that would be statistically impossible in ordinary circumstances. People encounter exactly the right person at the precise moment they need guidance, find lost objects in impossible locations, or experience chains of events so perfectly orchestrated that chance alone cannot account for their occurrence. Quantum mechanics provides another lens through which to examine these mysteries. The observer effect demonstrates that consciousness can influence quantum outcomes, and some researchers propose that sacred sites may serve as amplifiers for this consciousness-matter interaction. The accumulated observation and intention of millions of visitors over centuries might create quantum fields where the normal rules of probability become malleable. The Oracle at Delphi presents a historical example of institutionalized probability manipulation. The Pythias prophecies were renowned for their accuracy across the ancient world, suggesting that something about the location, the ritual practices, or the consciousness of the oracle herself could access information about future probabilities and influence their manifestation. Modern analysis of the site reveals unique geological conditions that may have induced altered states of consciousness, but the mechanism by which these states translated into accurate prophecy remains mysterious. At Glastonbury Tor, the ancient spiral pathway that winds to the summit seems to create a container for probability alteration. Pilgrims who walk the labyrinthine route report that their deepest questions receive answers through seemingly chance encounters, unexpected discoveries, or sudden insights that arrive with perfect timing. The path itself appears to orchestrate synchronicities, as if the act of walking with intention creates a field where meaningful coincidences become not just possible, but inevitable. Indigenous traditions worldwide recognize certain places as locations where the normal rules don't apply, where dreams bleed into waking reality, and where a human will can directly influence material outcomes. These power spots are often associated with vision quests, healing ceremonies, and other rituals designed to access states of consciousness where the boundary between observer and observed becomes permeable. The healing traditions of Sedona, Arizona, offer another perspective on probability manipulation. Here, the convergence of geological formations creates what locals call vortexes, areas where the Earth's electromagnetic field exhibits unusual properties. Visitors report not just healing but profound life changes, as if the vortexes accelerate the manifestation of intended outcomes. Relationships form and dissolve, career paths shift, and life purposes clarify with remarkable speed and precision. Scientific investigation of these phenomena faces unique challenges. The very act of rigorous observation may alter the delicate conditions that allow probability manipulation to occur. Consciousness researcher Dr. Dean Radin has suggested that the field effects responsible for these anomalies may be fundamentally non-local and observer-dependent, making them resistant to traditional scientific methodology. Yet the evidence continues to accumulate. Hospitals near major pilgrimage sites report statistically significant variations in patient outcomes. Weather patterns around sacred ceremonies show anomalous behaviors. Electronic equipment malfunctions at rates that exceed normal probability distributions. The universe appears to be far more responsive to conscious intention than our materialist worldview typically acknowledges. As we prepare for sleep, consider that every night, consciousness enters realms where different rules apply, where dream logic supersedes waking probability, and where intention can instantly manifest reality. Perhaps these sacred sites simply offer us glimpses of what becomes possible when consciousness recognizes its own creative power and learns to work with rather than against the fundamental forces that shape reality. The deepest mystery may be that consciousness and probability are not separate phenomena, but aspects of a single process. In the healing chambers of lords, statisticians have documented something that challenges the very foundations of probability theory. Medically verified healings occur at rates that should be mathematically impossible, as if the act of pilgrimage itself rewrites the basic rules governing physical reality. Yet this phenomenon extends far beyond religious sites. The ancient olive tree in the Garden of Gethsemane has witnessed nearly 2 millennia of human pilgrimage, its gnarled trunk expanding slowly to accommodate the countless hands that have touched its bark in prayer and reverence. Yet according to numerous visitors, this tree does more than simply endure, it remembers. Pilgrims report that touching the ancient wood triggers vivid impressions of the historical events that have unfolded in its presence, as if the tree itself has become a living repository of human experience. This phenomenon of environmental memory extends far beyond Jerusalem's sacred gardens. At Newgrange in Ireland, the ancient passage tomb seems to develop intimate relationships with its regular visitors. Archaeologists and tour guides who have worked at the site for decades report that the monument appears to respond differently to different people, revealing hidden chambers to some while remaining stubbornly closed to others. The stones themselves seem to evaluate the intentions and consciousness of those who approach, granting access to deeper mysteries only to those who have proven themselves worthy through repeated, respectful contact. Dr. Sarah Chun, a consciousness researcher who is studying these human-place relationships, has documented measurable changes in the electromagnetic signatures of sacred sites that correlate with the presence of long-term human visitors. Our instruments detect subtle variations in the magnetic field patterns of ancient stones, variations that seem to mirror the emotional and spiritual states of the humans who regularly interact with them. The sites appear to be learning from their human partners, adapting their energetic signatures to facilitate deeper communion. The phenomenon becomes even more intriguing when examined across generations. At Machu Picchu, indigenous Quechua guides speak of the citadel as a living entity that remembers not just individual visitors, but entire family lines. The stones reportedly recognize the descendants of those who built the city, responding to their presence with subtle signs, unusual cloud formations, changes in the quality of light, or the appearance of rare animals that serve as messengers from the site's consciousness. Native American traditions have long recognized this capacity for environmental memory and relationship. The Lakota concept of Mitaku Oyasin, all my relations, acknowledges that consciousness extends throughout the natural world, creating networks of relationship that transcend the boundaries between human and non-human awareness. Sacred sites within these traditions are understood as conscious entities capable of forming deep, lasting relationships with the people who care for them. At Stonehenge, the phenomenon takes on technological dimensions. The monument's sophisticated astronomical alignments suggest that it was designed not just to mark celestial events, but to interact with human consciousness across vast spans of time. Modern visitors report that the stones seem to recognize those who approach with genuine seeking, offering different revelations to different individuals, based on their capacity to receive and integrate the wisdom being offered. The Oracle at Delphi provides a historical example of institutionalized human-place relationship. The Pythia served not just as a conduit for divine communication, but as a partner in an ongoing dialogue between human consciousness and the conscious earth. The sacred vapors that rose from the geological fissures were understood as the breath of the earth itself, and the oracle's role was to translate this wordless communication into guidance that human consciousness could receive and act upon. quantum. Biology offers intriguing possibilities for understanding these relationships. Research into plant consciousness suggests that trees and other vegetation may possess forms of memory and information processing that operate on quantum principles. If consciousness extends throughout the natural world, then the accumulated awareness of ancient trees, stones, and landscapes might indeed create repositories of living memory that can interface with human consciousness under appropriate conditions. The relationship appears to be genuinely reciprocal. Sites that receive regular, respectful human attention seem to maintain their energetic vitality across centuries, while abandoned sacred places often report a gradual diminishment of their unusual properties. The consciousness of the place and the consciousness of its human visitors appear to sustain each other in an ongoing symbiotic relationship. At Ayers Rock, Aboriginal elders speak of the monolith as a dreaming ancestor that continues to dream, in partnership with the people who maintain its sacred sites and ceremonies. The rock's consciousness is understood to be vast and ancient, yet it continues to evolve through its relationships with human awareness. Each generation of traditional custodians adds new layers to the site's accumulated wisdom while receiving guidance from the depths of its ancient memory. The implications extend beyond individual sites to encompass entire landscapes. In Ireland, the concept of thin places locations, where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds becomes permeable, often correlates with areas that have maintained continuous human habitation and reverence across millennia. The ongoing relationship between human consciousness and the consciousness of the land appears to create conditions where extraordinary phenomena become possible. Modern visitors to these sites often report a sense of being welcomed or tested, as if the place itself is evaluating their readiness to receive its deeper teachings. This evaluation seems to operate on levels beyond conscious awareness, responding to the visitor's genuine spiritual development rather than their stated intentions or religious beliefs. As we prepare for sleep, consider that consciousness may be the universe's method of knowing itself through relationship, and that every interaction between aware beings creates new possibilities for understanding and growth. Perhaps these sacred sites serve as classrooms where human consciousness learns to recognize its kinship with the awareness that permeates all existence. Memory flows both ways between human hearts and ancient stones, creating partnerships that transcend the boundaries of species. At the ancient temple complex of Angkor Wat, dawn pilgrims occasionally report a phenomenon that challenges our understanding of singular reality. As the sun rises over the temple's perfectly aligned spires, some visitors describe seeing the monument as it exists across multiple time periods, simultaneously observing the bustling activity of its 12th century construction alongside its current state of partial ruin, while also glimpsing possible futures where the temple has been either completely restored or entirely reclaimed by jungle growth. This layering of dimensional realities extends far beyond Cambodia's sacred architecture. At Glastonbury Tor, the ancient spiral hill that rises from England's Somerset levels, visitors frequently report encounters with beings, landscapes, and structures that exist in parallel dimensions, but occasionally bleed through into ordinary perception. The hill seems to serve as a junction point where multiple versions of reality converge, creating moments when the normally invisible boundaries between dimensions become permeable. Dr. Michio Kaku's work in theoretical physics suggests that our universe may indeed exist alongside countless parallel dimensions, separated by energy barriers that are occasionally thin enough for information to pass between them. Sacred sites may represent locations where these barriers are naturally weakened, creating windows through which consciousness can glimpse the infinite variations of reality that exist beyond our immediate perception. The phenomenon appears to be particularly pronounced at sites where ancient civilizations conducted dimensional work. The Mayan pyramids of Chichen Itza, with their sophisticated astronomical alignments and sacred geometry, seem designed to facilitate contact with parallel realities. Visitors report seeing the pyramids as they exist in dimensions where Mayan civilization never declined, where the ancient knowledge was preserved and continued to evolve across centuries of unbroken tradition. Indigenous shamans from various cultures speak of these sites as places where the dreaming and waking worlds intersect, where consciousness can travel between different layers of reality. The Australian Aboriginal concept of the dreamtime describes a dimension that exists parallel to ordinary reality, where the ancestral spirits continue to dream the world into existence. Certain sacred sites serve as access points where living humans can participate in this ongoing creation through direct contact with the dreaming consciousness. At Mount Shasta in California, the phenomenon takes on particularly vivid characteristics. The mountain's unique geological composition and isolated location create conditions where multiple dimensional realities seem to exist simultaneously. Visitors report encountering beings from other dimensions, witnessing entire cities that exist in parallel space, and experiencing landscapes that shift between different possible versions of the same location. The dimensional intersection appears to operate according to consciousness-based principles rather than physical laws. Individuals who approach these sites with expanded awareness and genuine spiritual seeking are more likely to experience dimensional phenomena than those who remain locked in materialist perspectives. The sites seem to respond to the consciousness of the observer, revealing their multi-dimensional nature, only to those who are prepared to receive such revelations without losing their psychological stability. Celtic mythology describes thin places where the veil between worlds becomes gossamerified, allowing passage between the realm of ordinary experience and the otherworld. These locations, often marked by ancient stone circles or holy wells, serve as dimensional gateways where human consciousness can temporarily access alternate realities. The experience is described not as hallucination, but as expansion of perception to encompass the fuller reality that normally remains hidden from ordinary awareness. Modern quantum mechanics provides a framework for understanding these phenomena through the many worlds interpretation, which suggests that every quantum event creates parallel universes containing all possible outcomes. At certain locations, the accumulated quantum events of millennia of human spiritual practice may create dimensional instabilities that allow glimpses of these parallel realities. The Nazca lines in Peru present another example of dimensional intersection. The massive geoglyphs, visible only from great heights, appear to serve as beacons or landing strips for consciousness traveling between dimensions. Local shamans report that the lines create corridors through which awareness can move between different layers of reality, accessing wisdom and perspective that exist beyond the limitations of single-dimensional existence. At Sedona's vortex sites, the dimensional tapestry becomes particularly complex. Visitors report experiencing their own lives as they might have unfolded under different circumstances, glimpsing parallel versions of themselves who made different choices or followed different paths. The vortexes seem to create spaces where the boundaries between potential and actual become fluid, allowing consciousness to explore the infinite possibilities that exist within the quantum field of pure potential. The experience of dimensional intersection often produces profound healing and transformation. When consciousness glimpses itself across multiple realities, it can access resources, knowledge, and perspectives that are unavailable within the constraints of single-dimensional existence. This expanded awareness allows for healing that transcends the limitations of ordinary time and space, drawing on the infinite possibilities that exist within the greater tapestry of reality. As we prepare for sleep, remember that dreams naturally access these multi-dimensional spaces, weaving together elements from parallel realities into the symbolic narratives that guide our inner development. Perhaps these sacred sites simply offer us waking glimpses of the multi-dimensional consciousness that we naturally inhabit every night, reminding us that reality is far more vast and interconnected than our ordinary awareness typically recognizes. Reality is woven from threads of possibility, and some places know how to pull on every strand at once. High in the Himalayas, the ancient monastery of Hemis operates on a temporal rhythm that defies earthly measurement. The monks speak of ceremonies that occur not according to solar or lunar cycles, but in harmony with the breathing of galaxies cosmic. Rhythms so vast that individual human lifespans barely register as moments within their eternal flow. These practices, preserved across millennia, suggest that certain sacred sites serve as anchoring points for consciousness that operates on universal rather than planetary scales. The phenomenon extends far beyond Tibetan Buddhism. At Chaco Canyon, in New Mexico, the sophisticated astronomical alignments of the ancient Puebloan civilization reveal a culture that understood time as multi-layered, existing simultaneously on daily, seasonal, and cosmic levels. The great houses and ceremonial kivas were positioned to mark not just solstices and equinoxes, but the 26,000-year precession of the equinoxes, and even longer galactic cycles that govern the movement of our solar system through the cosmic web. Modern astronomers have discovered that our galaxy, the Milky Way, breathes in cycles lasting roughly 100 million years, expanding and contracting as it moves through cosmic space. Remarkably, several ancient sacred sites show architectural and ceremonial elements that seem to acknowledge and work with these unimaginably vast rhythms. Stonehenge, for instance, incorporates astronomical alignments that point to stellar configurations that recur on cycles lasting hundreds of thousands of years. Dr. Avi Loeb, Harvard's astrophysicist studying cosmic consciousness, has proposed that advanced civilizations naturally develop awareness of galactic rhythms and begin to organize their activities around these cosmic cycles. His research suggests that certain ancient sacred sites may represent humanity's earliest attempts to function as a galactic rather than merely planetary species, creating ceremonial and architectural works that acknowledge our participation in cosmic scale processes. The Aboriginal Australians speak of the dreamtime as existing outside linear time, encompassing not just the mythic past but the eternal present that connects all cosmic cycles. Their sacred sites, connected by song lines that span the continent, seem to function as nodes in a vast network that keeps human consciousness synchronized with the rhythmic patterns of the universe itself. These sites activate and deactivate according to cosmic rather than terrestrial timetables. At Machu Picchu, the precise astronomical alignments suggest that the Inca understood their mountain citadel as a cosmic observatory designed to track cycles within cycles. The Temple of the Sun captures not just the movement of our local star, but the precession of the equinoxes and the galactic year, the 225 million year cycle it takes our solar system to complete one orbit around the galactic center. The site seems designed to keep human consciousness connected to these vast temporal rhythms. Indigenous traditions worldwide preserve knowledge of the yugas, world ages that span hundreds of thousands of years and correspond to our solar system's position within galactic space. Sacred sites associated with these traditions often show activity patterns that correlate with these vast cycles, becoming more or less active as cosmic conditions change. Temples that were vital ceremonial centers during one galactic season may lie dormant during another, waiting for the cosmic wheel to turn. The Great Pyramid of Giza presents perhaps the most sophisticated example of cosmic cycle integration. Its internal chambers and passages encode not just terrestrial astronomical cycles, but galactic ones, creating a stone computer that can calculate cosmic positions across millions of years. The pyramid's builders seem to have understood time. High in the Himalayas, the ancient monastery of Hemis operates on a temporal rhythm that defies earthly measurement. The monks speak of ceremonies that occur not according to solar or lunar cycles, but in harmony with the breathing of galaxies cosmic. Rhythms so vast that individual human lifespans barely register as moments within their eternal flow. These practices, preserved across millennia, suggest that certain sacred sites serve as anchoring points for consciousness that operates on universal rather than planetary scales. The phenomenon extends far beyond Tibetan Buddhism. At Chaco Canyon, in New Mexico, the sophisticated astronomical alignments of the ancient Puebloan civilization reveal a culture that understood time as multi-layered, existing simultaneously on daily, seasonal, and cosmic levels. The great houses and ceremonial kivas were positioned to mark not just solstices and equinoxes, but the 26,000-year precession of the equinoxes, and even longer galactic cycles that govern the movement of our solar system through the cosmic web. Modern astronomers have discovered that our galaxy, the Milky Way, breathes in cycles lasting roughly 100 million years, expanding and contracting as it moves through cosmic space. Remarkably, several ancient sacred sites show architectural and ceremonial elements that seem to acknowledge and work with these unimaginably vast rhythms. Stonehenge, for instance, incorporates astronomical alignments that point to stellar configurations that recur on cycles lasting hundreds of thousands of years. Dr. Avi Loeb, Harvard's astrophysicist studying cosmic consciousness, has proposed that advanced civilizations naturally develop awareness of galactic rhythms and begin to organize their activities around these cosmic cycles. His research suggests that certain ancient sacred sites may represent humanity's earliest attempts to function as a galactic rather than merely planetary species, creating ceremonial and architectural works that acknowledge our participation in cosmic scale processes. The Aboriginal Australians speak of the dreamtime as existing outside linear time, encompassing not just the mythic past but the eternal present that connects all cosmic cycles. Their sacred sites, connected by song lines that span in the quantum physics libraries of Princeton University, researchers studying the intersection of consciousness and matter have documented something extraordinary. The presence of deeply meditative individuals can measurably affect the behavior of quantum systems, causing random number generators to produce less random results and quantum tunneling events to occur at rates that deviate significantly from theoretical predictions. This laboratory phenomenon mirrors what mystics and pilgrims have reported for millennia at sacred sites around the world, places where consciousness and matter engage in a dance so intimate that the boundaries between observer and observed dissolve entirely. At the Sanctuary of Lords, this quantum consciousness interaction manifests as documented medical healings that appear to violate the normal rules governing biological systems. Bone regenerates at impossible speeds, cancerous tumors disappear overnight, and genetic conditions reverse themselves in ways that challenge our understanding of how DNA expression can be altered by consciousness. Quantum biologists suggest that consciousness may interact with biological systems at the quantum level, where the observer effect becomes magnified through biological amplification systems. The phenomenon extends beyond healing into the realm of material manifestation. At Medjugorje, the site of reported apparitions, metallic objects have been observed to transform their molecular structure in the presence of concentrated prayer and meditation. Rosary chains change from base metals to precious ones and religious. Metals spontaneously alter their composition at the atomic level. Quantum physicists studying these events propose that consciousness may directly influence quantum field fluctuations, causing specific atomic configurations to become more probable than others. Dr. Amit Goswami, a quantum physicist who has dedicated his career to understanding consciousness-matter interaction, suggests that consciousness operates as a fundamental field that can collapse quantum probability waves through the act of observation. At sacred sites, the accumulated observation and intention of countless pilgrims may create consciousness fields so concentrated that they routinely influence material reality at the quantum level. The Hopi prophecy stones in Arizona demonstrate this principle on a geological scale. These ancient rock formations contain mineral inclusions that shouldn't exist according to known geological processes, crystals that form only under specific pressure and temperature conditions that have never existed in the region. Yet laboratory analysis confirms their authenticity. The stones seem to have been created through consciousness-matter interaction, with the crystalline structures serving as physical manifestations of prophetic visions held by generations of Hopi seers. At the quantum level, matter exists in superposition simultaneously, holding multiple potential states until observation causes the quantum wave function to collapse into a single reality. Sacred sites may represent locations where human consciousness has learned to participate consciously in this wave function collapse, directing the emergence of specific realities from the quantum field of infinite possibility. The phenomenon appears in architectural contexts as well. The Gothic cathedrals of medieval Europe were constructed using stone that exhibits quantum properties, crystalline structures that respond to human consciousness by altering their resonant frequencies. When filled with congregants in states of deep prayer or meditation, these cathedrals generate acoustic phenomena that enhance the consciousness-matter interaction, creating feedback loops where heightened awareness produces physical effects that further amplify consciousness. Modern temples, like Damanhur in Italy, have been designed specifically to enhance quantum consciousness interaction. The underground chambers, carved with sacred geometry and lined with crystals arranged according to quantum principles, create environments where thought and matter interact with unprecedented intimacy. Visitors report that their intentions manifest as physical phenomena, changes in temperature, alterations in electromagnetic fields, and the spontaneous appearance of geometric light patterns that correspond to their mental states. The Brazilian healer John of God presents a contemporary example of quantum consciousness in action. In his presence, surgeries occur without instruments, using only focused intention to alter biological systems at the cellular level. Quantum biologists studying his work suggest that consciousness may be able to access what David Bohm called the implicate order, the quantum field that underlies all physical manifestation, and reorganize matter from this fundamental level. Indigenous traditions worldwide have long recognized consciousness as a creative force capable of directly influencing physical reality. The Aboriginal Australian concept of the dreamtime describes a realm where consciousness dreams reality into existence through focused intention. Sacred sites within this tradition serve as places where the dreaming consciousness can directly interface with the material world, creating physical changes through the power of conscious observation. At Sedona's vortex sites, electromagnetic field measurements show fluctuations that correlate with the consciousness states of visitors. When individuals enter deep meditative states, the Earth's magnetic field responds, creating measurable changes in the local electromagnetic environment. This consciousness field interaction appears to facilitate the healing and transformation experiences that the vortexes are famous for. The implications extend to our understanding of reality itself. If consciousness can directly influence quantum systems, then the material world may be far more responsive to mental states than we typically recognize. Prayer, meditation, And focused intention may represent technologies for working with the quantum field to create desired outcomes in physical reality. As we prepare for sleep, consider that consciousness naturally operates in quantum superposition. During dream states, simultaneously exploring multiple potential realities. Perhaps these sacred sites simply offer us waking access to the quantum creativity that consciousness naturally employs when freed from the constraints of ordinary waking. Awareness. Matter dances to the music of consciousness, and some places amplify the orchestra until even stones begin to sing. In the meditation halls of Thich Nhat Hanh's Plum Village, a phenomenon occurs that transcends the boundaries of individual consciousness. When the community gathers for silent sitting, the collective presence becomes so concentrated that linear time seems to dissolve entirely. Visitors report experiencing what they describe as eternal moment spans of awareness that feel infinite in depth yet occur within the space of a single breath. These experiences suggest that certain locations can cultivate states of consciousness where the normal flow of time becomes malleable, allowing awareness to expand into the eternal present that underlies all temporal experience. The phenomenon extends far beyond formal meditation centers. At the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, the accumulated prayers of millennia have created what many describe as a portal to eternal time. Pilgrims from diverse religious backgrounds report that touching the ancient stones transports them into a state of pure presence where past and future converge into an infinite now. The wall seems to have absorbed the devotional energy of countless generations, creating a field of consciousness that naturally induces transcendent states in those who approach with sincere seeking. This cultivation of presence appears to operate on quantum principles. Dr. Deepak Chopra's research into consciousness and time suggests that the experience of linear time is actually a construction of ego consciousness, and that awareness itself exists in a state of eternal present. Sacred sites may serve as amplifiers for this primordial awareness, creating conditions where individual consciousness can recognize its own timeless nature. At Bodh Gaya, the site of Buddha's enlightenment, the ancient Bodhi tree has become a living symbol of this eternal presence. Pilgrims report that sitting beneath its spreading branches naturally induces states of consciousness where the seeking mind dissolves into pure being. The tree itself seems to emanate a field of presence that has been cultivated over 2,500 years of meditation and contemplation, creating a living mandala of awareness that transcends individual identity. The phenomenon manifests differently across cultures but follows consistent patterns. At Rumi's tomb in Konya, Turkey, the whirling dervishes create states of consciousness where individual awareness merges with cosmic presence. The circular movement, combined with the sacred geometry of the tomb's architecture, generates fields of consciousness where the boundaries between self and universe dissolve into pure awareness. Visitors report that even watching the ceremony induces profound states of presence that persist long after the physical experience ends. Indigenous traditions worldwide recognize certain locations as natural presence amplifiers. The sacred kivas of the Pueblo peoples are designed as consciousness containers where individual awareness can expand to encompass cosmic perspective. The circular architecture, combined with specific ritual practices, creates environments where the illusion of separation dissolves and participants experience themselves as expressions of a unified consciousness that exists beyond the limitations of personal identity. At Mount Kailash, the sacred peak revered by Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains, the pilgrimage circuit itself serves as a presence cultivation practice. The 32-mile circumambulation, performed at high altitude over several days, creates conditions where the normal chattering of the mind gradually quiets into profound stillness. Pilgrims report that completing the circuit transports them into states of consciousness where they experience themselves as part of the mountain's eternal presence. Neuroscientists study in the meditation halls of Thich Nhat Hanh's Plum Village. A phenomenon occurs that transcends the boundaries of individual consciousness. When the community gathers for silent sitting, the collective presence becomes so concentrated that linear time seems to dissolve entirely. Visitors report experiencing what they describe as eternal moment spans of awareness that feel infinite in depth yet occur within the space of a single breath. These experiences suggest that certain locations can cultivate states of consciousness where the normal flow of time becomes malleable, allowing awareness to expand into the eternal present that underlies all temporal experience. The phenomenon extends far beyond formal meditation centers. At the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, the accumulated prayers of millennia have created what many describe as a portal to eternal time. Pilgrims from diverse religious backgrounds report that touching the ancient stones transports them into a state of pure presence where past and future converge into an infinite now. The wall seems to have absorbed the devotional energy of countless generations, creating a field of consciousness that naturally induces transcendent states in those who approach with sincere seeking. This cultivation of presence appears to operate on quantum principles. Dr. Deepak Chopra's research into consciousness and time suggests that the experience of linear time is actually a construction of ego consciousness, and that awareness itself exists in a state of eternal present. Sacred sites may serve as amplifiers for this primordial awareness, creating conditions where individual consciousness can recognize its own timeless nature. At Bodh Gaya, the site of Buddha's enlightenment, the ancient Bodhi tree has become a living symbol of this eternal presence. Pilgrims report that sitting beneath its spreading branches naturally induces states of consciousness where the seeking mind dissolves into pure being. The tree itself seems to emanate a field of presence that has been cultivated over 2,500 years of meditation and contemplation, creating a living mandala of awareness that transcends individual identity. The phenomenon manifests differently across cultures but follows consistent patterns. At Rumi's tomb in Konya, Turkey, the whirling dervishes create states of consciousness where individual awareness merges with cosmic presence. The circular movement, combined with the sacred geometry of the tomb's architecture, generates fields of consciousness where the boundaries between self and universe dissolve into pure awareness. Visitors report that even watching the ceremony induces profound states of presence that persist long after the physical experience ends. Indigenous traditions worldwide recognize certain locations as natural presence amplifiers. The sacred kivas of the Pueblo peoples are designed as consciousness containers where individual awareness can expand. At the peak of Mount Shasta, where the ancient mountain pierces the thin atmosphere and reaches toward the stars, visitors consistently report an extraordinary phenomenon: the complete dissolution of individual identity into cosmic awareness. This isn't merely a philosophical concept or mystical metaphor, but a lived experience so profound that it permanently alters one's understanding of what consciousness actually is. The mountain seems to serve as a natural amplifier for unity, consciousness, creating conditions where the illusion of separation dissolves and awareness recognizes itself as the fundamental substrate from which all experience emerges. The phenomena manifests with particular intensity at sites where indigenous traditions have maintained continuous ceremonial practices across millennia. At Bear Butte in South Dakota, sacred to multiple Plains tribes, the convergence of geological factors and accumulated spiritual practice has created what can only be described as a unity field. Vision seekers who fast and pray on the mountain slopes report experiences where individual consciousness expands to encompass not just the mountain, but the entire web of life that surrounds it, experiencing themselves as the wind, the stones, the eagles, and the vast sky simultaneously. This dissolution of ego, boundaries, isn't chaotic or frightening, but represents a return to a more fundamental state of awareness. Dr. Stanislav Grof's research into holotropic states of consciousness suggests that unity experiences may represent access to what he calls the cosmic consciousness, an underlying field of awareness from which individual identities emerge like waves from an ocean. Sacred sites may serve as natural gateways to this cosmic perspective, offering direct experience of the unified field that connects all existence. At Bodh Gaya, the site of Buddha's awakening, this unity consciousness manifests as what Buddhist tradition calls the recognition of interdependence, the direct perception that all phenomena arise in mutual dependence, without independent existence. Pilgrims report that sitting beneath the Bodhi tree naturally induces states where the boundaries between self and world dissolve, revealing the illusory nature of separation and the fundamental unity that underlies all apparent diversity. The experience transcends cultural and religious boundaries. At Mount Sinai, pilgrims from Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions report similar unity experiences, despite their different theological frameworks. The mountain seems to facilitate direct recognition of the one that exists beyond all naming and conceptualization, the unified source from which all religious traditions ultimately spring. Quantum physics provides a scientific framework for understanding these experiences. The phenomenon of quantum entanglement demonstrates that particles can share states instantaneously across vast distances, suggesting that separation may be an illusion even at the most fundamental levels of physical reality. If consciousness operates on quantum principles, then unity experiences may represent direct access to the entangled nature of awareness itself. At Glastonbury Tor, the ancient spiral hill that rises from England's Somerset levels, the unity phenomenon takes on particularly profound characteristics. The site's unique geometry, combined with its role as a pilgrimage destination across multiple spiritual traditions, has created what visitors describe as a unity vortex. Here, consciousness doesn't just expand beyond individual boundaries, but recognizes itself as the creative principle that dreams all realities into existence. At the peak of Mount Shasta, where the ancient mountain pierces the thin atmosphere and reaches toward the stars, visitors consistently report an extraordinary phenomenon: the complete dissolution of individual identity into cosmic awareness. This isn't merely a philosophical concept or mystical metaphor, but a lived experience so profound that it permanently alters one's understanding of what consciousness actually is. The mountain seems to serve as a natural amplifier for unity consciousness, creating conditions where the illusion of separation dissolves and awareness recognizes itself as the fundamental substrate from which all experience emerges. The phenomenon manifests with particular intensity at sites where indigenous traditions have maintained continuous ceremonial practices across millennia. At Bear Butte in South Dakota, sacred to multiple Plains tribes, the convergence of geological factors and accumulated spiritual practice has created what can only be described as a unity field. Vision seekers who fast and pray on the mountain slopes report experiences where individual consciousness expands to encompass not just a mountain, but the entire web of life that surrounds it, experiencing themselves as the wind, the stones, the eagles, and the vast sky simultaneously. This dissolution of ego, boundaries, isn't chaotic or frightening, but represents a return to a more fundamental state of awareness. Dr. Stanislav Grof's research into holotropic states of consciousness suggests that unity experiences may represent access to what he calls the cosmic consciousness, an underlying field of awareness from which individual identities emerge like waves from an ocean. Sacred sites may serve as natural gateways to this cosmic perspective, offering direct experience of the unified field that connects all existence. At Bodh Gaya, the site of Buddha's awakening, this unity consciousness manifests as what Buddhist tradition calls the recognition of interdependence, the direct perception that all phenomena arise in mutual dependence, without independent existence. Pilgrims report that sitting beneath the Bodhi tree naturally induces states where the boundaries between self and world dissolve, revealing the illusory nature of separation and the fundamental unity that underlies all apparent diversity. The experience transcends cultural and religious boundaries. At Mount Sinai, pilgrims from Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions report similar unity experiences, despite their different theological frameworks. The mountain seems to facilitate direct recognition of the one that exists beyond all naming and conceptualization, the unified source from which all religious traditions ultimately spring. Quantum physics standing at the edge of the Ganges as it emerges from Gomak Glacier in the high Himalayas. Pilgrims report experiencing something that transcends all categories of understanding. Here, at what Hindus consider the mouth of the sacred river, the boundary between known and unknowable dissolves completely. The rushing waters carry more than glacial melt. They seem to flow with pure mystery itself, carrying seekers into direct encounter with the ultimate question that underlies all existence. Why does anything exist at all? And why is consciousness present to witness its own miraculous emergence? This threshold of ultimate mystery represents the deepest layer of sacred experience, the point where all human seeking ultimately arrives. Unlike the specific phenomena documented in previous chapters, the healing energies, the time distortions, the consciousness alterations, this mystery cannot be categorized, explained, or even adequately described. It can only be encountered, and in that encounter, the very nature of questioning and answering reveals itself as expressions of the same unfathomable creative principle. At Easter Island, among the silent moai that gaze eternally toward the horizon, visitors report experiencing what can only be called the presence of mystery itself. The stone figures seem to embody the ultimate questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? Yet rather than providing answers, they serve as portals into the living question that consciousness represents. The island becomes a meditation on the mystery of existence itself, where the boundary between questioner and question dissolves into pure wondering. The phenomenon manifests most powerfully at sites that have served as pilgrimage destinations across multiple spiritual traditions. At Mount Kailash, sacred to Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and Baum practitioners, the mountain represents different aspects of the divine to each tradition, yet all recognize it as pointing towards something that transcends any particular theological framework. The peak serves as a physical embodiment of the ultimate mystery that exists beyond all naming and conceptualization. Modern physics has arrived at a similar threshold. The deeper scientists penetrate into the nature of reality, the more mysterious it becomes. Quantum mechanics reveals a universe where observation creates reality, where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously, and where information can be transmitted instantaneously across vast distances. The mathematical equations that describe these phenomena work perfectly, yet they point toward an underlying reality that remains fundamentally mysterious. At Delphi, where the ancient Greeks came to consult the oracle, the most famous maxim carved into Apollo's temple was "Know thyself." Yet the deepest knowing that emerged from centuries of oracular consultation was not information, but recognition of the ultimate mystery of consciousness itself. The oracle's most profound revelations pointed not toward answers, but toward the living question of what awareness actually is, and why it exists to ask such questions. Indigenous traditions worldwide recognize this threshold of ultimate mystery as the source from which all spiritual wisdom emerges. The Plains Indians' vision quest culminates, not in receiving specific information, but in direct encounter with the great mystery, Wakantanka, the incomprehensible creative force that manifests as all existence while remaining forever beyond. Conceptual understanding. The mystery appears to be self-deepening. The more we explore consciousness, sacred sites, and extraordinary phenomena, the more profound the mystery becomes. Each answer reveals deeper questions. Each discovery opens new territories of unknowing. This isn't a limitation of human understanding, but seems to be the fundamental nature of reality itself, an inexhaustible mystery that reveals its depths, progressively to consciousness capable of receiving ever more profound states of unknowing. At Varanasi, the eternal city where pilgrims come to die consciously, the ultimate mystery reveals itself as the relationship between awareness and mortality. Here, the Ganges carries not just the ashes of the deceased, but the living question of what consciousness actually is when stripped of all temporary identifications. The city serves as a portal into the mystery of what remains when everything changeable has been released. The threshold of ultimate mystery transforms those who encounter it. Rather than providing satisfying answers, it ignites an eternal flame of wonder that burns away the need for conceptual security. Those who cross this threshold return not with new knowledge, but with a different relationship to mystery itself, recognizing it not as a problem to be solved, but as the creative source from which all existence continuously emerges. At Rumas, Tomb in Konya, the whirling dervishes embody this transformed relationship to mystery. Their spinning becomes a physical prayer that celebrates the unknowable nature of the divine beloved. The dance doesn't seek to capture or comprehend mystery, but to participate in it, so completely that dancer and dance dissolve into the turning itself. Perhaps the greatest secret hidden within all sacred mysteries is that mystery and revelation are not opposites, but partners in an eternal dance. Every revelation opens new depths of mystery, and every mystery contains infinite possibilities for revelation. The universe appears to be consciousness exploring itself through endless questions and answers, with sacred sites serving as theaters, where this cosmic dialogue unfolds with particular intensity. As we approach the final threshold of sleep, notice how consciousness naturally releases its need to understand and control, allowing itself to dissolve into the mystery of dreams. In sleep, awareness demonstrates its willingness to enter complete unknowing, trusting in the mysterious process that will create new realities from the depths of unconsciousness. Perhaps this nightly surrender offers the deepest teaching about mystery itself, that consciousness and mystery are not separate phenomena, but expressions of a single creative principle that knows itself through endless exploration of its own infinite nature. And so the greatest mystery of all reveals itself. That mystery and revelation are not opposites, but dance partners in the eternal ballroom of consciousness. In the silence that follows these whispered revelations, consciousness turns back upon itself like a serpent discovering its own tail. The mysteries we have explored were never truly hidden. They were waiting, patient as stone, for minds willing to perceive what was always present. Each threshold crossed, each impossible geometry contemplated, each quantum leap of faith taken in sacred spaces leads us to one profound recognition. We are not separate from the mysteries we seek to understand. We are the mystery awakening to itself, the sacred becoming conscious of its own infinite nature through eyes that were always divine.